we left off, I just want to have a kind of a refresher, little bit. Hopefully you guys got a chance. Did you guys get a chance to spend time with dual agency this weekend, with designated dual agency this weekend? Good. You're going to spend time with it this weekend and the next weekend or that, the next weekend or that. I'm telling you guys, the more you expose yourself to it, the better it gets, the easier it gets. So please, please, please don't let this pass you as we go on, knowing that you're still going to be tested on dual agency, agency types on your exam. So keep refreshing it. And I just want to, I think it's a good refresher. I did this morning, saved me a few seconds once class got started. I don't want to get carried away with my drawing. So just as a quick refresher, what dual agency looks like and what designated dual agency looks like. Remember, the relationship is between the client and who? It's the client and the firm, not the individual agent. So if you're in dual or not, it depends on if the firm is in a relationship with the other side. It doesn't matter about you. Independently, it's a matter of the firm. So in dual agency, buyer and seller, remember, one transaction, one firm, two clients. So the seller has hired the firm to sell 123 Main Street. The buyer has hired the firm to help them purchase 123 Main Street. Okay, the firm is in dual agency, and under the umbrella of the firm, all the other agents are in the firm now as well. In dual agency, advocacy goes away. I can't offer advice. I can't tell my buyer one thing that isn't going to harm my seller. I can't tell my seller something that's not going to harm my buyer. One way we can try to, I hate to say avoid this, but one way we can possibly prepare for this is why we try to have conversations with buyers and sellers before dual agency happens. So for example, when you're out showing property to your buyers, maybe they look at 5 homes that another firm has listed, right? And while they're looking at those other homes, you can say, oh, well, once you find the suitable one and we go under contract, you're going to want to get a home inspection, right? So now when they go under contract with a property that your firm has listed and they say, should I get a home inspection? You can say, well, remember, we talked about that, right? So if we can have some of these conversations up front, and this is why we have listing appointments. This is why we have buyer consultation appointments. We try to give this information up front. So when we do get into dual agency, we've talked about it, and hopefully nobody feels that we're doing them a disservice. We talked about an alternative, an extension to dual agency, if you will. An extension to dual agency would be designated dual agency. And in designated dual agency, one agent of the firm is kicked off the wall to work exclusively with the buyer, and a different agent in the firm is kicked off the wall to work exclusively with the seller. Where are the firm and the rest of the agents? There's 2 agents that have been designated. Where's everybody else? They're still, I see your mouse moving. They're still in dual, aren't they? The firm and the rest of the agents are still in dual. They still owe that duty, that loyalty to both clients. The buyer's agent works exclusively with the buyer. The seller's agent works exclusively with the seller. Okay, so this is kind of the refresher. Again, I hope you spent time with it. I hope that you will continue to spend time with it. Let's talk about a scenario. Let's say, remember, you guys all got your license, and congratulations. And you affiliated with Julie's Real Estate Shop. So you all come work for me. Great. I'm the BIC, I'm the firm, right? This is my buyer, my seller. I allow you to work with my buyer and my seller. And let's say it's Tuesday morning. So let's say we're at the office and we're having a sales meeting. And I go through, upcoming dates and, training is next week and, blah, blah, blah. And then I ask, does anybody have a new listing they'd like to share? Anybody have a new listing coming? And one of you pops your hands up and you say, I got one coming Friday. It's a 3-bed, 2-bath. It's located, here, wherever. It's got a garage. It's a 1-story. With you discussing and describing the property, have you said anything that could harm the individual people? 3-bed, 2-bath, could that harm anybody in the transaction? We advertise that, don't we? That's all over Zillow and realtor.com. But let's say I'm a bad broker in charge and I'm not really paying attention. And while you're talking, I go over here and I get me a bagel and I'm not really paying attention to what you're saying. And you're going on and on and on about the property. And in me not paying attention, and you and your excitement, your conversation switches gear from the property to the person. You're no longer talking about the property. Now you're talking about the seller and why the seller has to sell and what their motivation for selling is and their time frame for selling. And I'm over here, whatever, I'm not paying you any attention at all. We can talk about the property all day long. The problem comes up when we talk about the people. Remember, we're going to get into our what we can and can't say about the people, but remember, we need to be careful about what we share about the people. If we're discussing their price or their terms or their motive, then we need to be careful about what we discuss about those people. So you're telling the entire office staff that the seller is highly motivated. They got to move quickly. They'll pretty much consider any offer they can get. Have you harmed my seller? You just harmed my seller because your conversation switched gear from the property to the people. And furthermore, you harmed your peers because you sat there and blah, 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 blah. If the opportunity for designated dual agency comes up, nobody that was in sales meeting this morning can be designated because you and your buyer now know information that can harm my seller. So it's really important that we avoid, I call it water cooler gossip, but it's really important that we avoid water cooler gossip. Stick strictly to discussing the property. You can talk about the property all day long, but the only person you should be discussing the people with is me, because I'm your broker in charge. And if you have something going on, if you're a newbie, I'm probably going on that listing appointment with you anyway. But if you have a problem, if you have something you need to discuss, that's why you have a broker in charge. Don't go to your friends in the office. Because if you go to your friends in the office now, the opportunity for designated dual agency comes up and I say, do you know anything about my seller that can harm them in this transaction? And you say, well, I was at business meeting and I heard that they had to sell fast and they would consider anything. Can I designate you to work exclusively with the buyer? No, because you know something about my seller because I allowed the listing agent to blah, blah, blah. So just be very careful about engaging in water cooler gossip. If that happens, if the whole office has been tainted and nobody can be designated to work with the buyer, then we can't do designated dual agency and we're stuck with our only option being dual. And what I know about dual is not always the best for the buyer and the seller because we've removed their advocacy. So stop talking. I guess that's the moral of that story. Make sure you're just talking about the property when you are with your peers. Do not talk about the people. Questions about this before we move on? We're going to see dual agency again in Unit 8. Guess what? We're going to see dual and designated again when we get to licensed law and commission rule. So this is not our first time discussing dual and designated. It won't be our last. Remember, you got the recordings, you got your notes. I saw lots of hands go up about you guys spending time with dual agency. If you looked at it even once this weekend, I promise you it's better than what it was on Thursday. Agree? If you looked at it twice this weekend, it's even better than better, and the more so. Guys, remember, I'm starting to get lots of questions about homework. The only thing you have to turn into me is your selfie with your intro. Everything else you do is on you. I'm here to answer questions on, whatever outside of class. The only homework assignment I give you guys, always review where we've been. Remember, ask yourself, what did I learn today? What was my aha moment? What was it that Julie said that confused me that I need to go back and review, watch the recording? Always look at where we've been and always look ahead at where we're going. I think that'll help best prepare you for class if you can look at, how many of you looked at Unit 8 before today? A very, very very small few of you. So guys, we're in it. We're in it. And we just keep going forward from here. So it's tough when you come to class and you hear it for the first time here. It's about exposure, repetition. I got a good suggestion yesterday from a student. If you're in class and you're not sure of this topic, for example, jot down the time that we're talking about it. That could save you time from hunting it in the recording. You with me? So if at 10 o'clock I say something that makes you go, what? Write down 10 o'clock on your notebook. So when you're going back and watching the recording, you know that you can start about 10 o'clock and you're not searching. I don't want you guys spending your study time, you know, scrolling around. So jot down the time so you know where to find it. Thank you for that. Questions, comments, concerns? Okay. So the last big piece of Unit 7 that we need to talk about, we're going to talk about agency disclosures. Or actually, I should say agency disclosure, singular. And this is one of these topics. Please let me ask that you guys hold your questions until the end. I'll have plenty of time left over for questions, but if you give me just a minute, I very well may answer your question. So sit back, take it in, and then we'll open it up for questions. With agency disclosure, we use, oh, here we go. Here's a suggestion for studying. Turn your Learn, Test, Pass slides into a book. No. I'm not going to sell it. You got it for free on Learn, Test, Pass. I'm making some money on the black market. All right. So working with real estate agents. Working with real estate agents is our agency disclosure. Please listen to me carefully for 1 second. Stop writing for 1 second and listen to me. Agency disclosure does not create agency. I'm going to say that again. Agency disclosure does not create agency. Agency disclosure is my opportunity to tell everybody, to tell the world what side of the transaction I'm on, what role I play, and most importantly, agency disclosure allows me to warn the consumer, I don't owe you confidentiality unless you decide to hire me. We need to tell people, careful what you tell me. Let's say I represent the seller, for example, and you're a potential buyer, and you start coming in with how much you're willing to pay and what you pre-approved for. Where's my loyalty? My loyalty is not to you because you come into my open house and start blah, 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 blah. My loyalty is to my seller. Isn't that fair to that consumer to let them know to stop talking? Please stop talking, because what you share with me, you might as well be talking directly to the seller. So agency disclosure is my opportunity to warn the consumer that what they share with me, I have to share with my client. And more importantly, it tells the consumer, I don't owe you confidentiality if you don't hire me. The only time I owe you confidentiality is if you hire me. And how do you hire me? You enter into an agency agreement with me. Now, Unit 8 is where we're heading today. Unit 8 is our agency agreement. Does everybody hear the difference when I say agency disclosure and agency agreement? Can everybody hear I'm talking about two different things? Right now, we're talking about agency disclosure. And our agency disclosure is the working with real estate agents. This is required on all sales transactions. This is a problem topic all day long. Does that say lease transactions? Does that say lease? No, it says what? Sales. Does that say all real estate transactions, sales and lease? Sales and lease? No, it just says sales. We only do working with real estate agents for residential sales and commercial sales. Okay, so it's mandatory with all sales transactions. We hand them the disclosure. We review it with them at first substantial contact. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about first substantial contact in just a second, so hang on to that. And as with everything else, we keep everything, all records, for how long? We keep all records for 3 years. And that does include our working with real estate agent disclosure. We can't assume people know that I represent the seller. Even if you're coming into my open house, there's a sign in the front yard with my name on it. You saw the advertising online with my name on it. You walked into the open house and saw me wearing my name badge. I never can let somebody assume that they know that I work with the seller. And that's what the disclosure is for. So the purpose of the disclosure is to make sure the consumer understands as soon as possible that I don't owe them confidentiality. Remember, I don't owe you old car until you enter into an agency agreement with me. And if you never enter into an agency agreement with me, then I don't owe you old car. So we're warning. I always think of our agency disclosure. We're reading the consumer their Miranda rights. And in part, what do the Miranda rights say? Anything you say can be held against you. So we're letting the customer know, we're letting the buyer know. Tell me how much you're willing to pay for this house. Don't I have a duty to share that with my seller? Don't I have to share that with my seller client? You come in and say, I know it's listed for this, but we're in a multiple offer situation. I'm ready to go $30,000 over asking price. My loyalty is to my seller, and the consumer needs to know that before they start talking. Y'all, people talk. It blows my mind how people just start talking. And when they find out you're in real estate, people love to talk about real estate. And when you're in real estate, people are just going to start talking. They're just going to come up to you. When you join your firm, they're going to encourage you to wear your name badge everywhere you go. Go to the grocery store, wear your name badge. Why? Want people to come up to the grocery store and start talking about real estate. Yes. So if you're wearing your name badge in Harris Teeter and you're in aisle 4 and somebody comes up and says, oh man, you're in real estate. Well, I really thought about buying, and now the time has come. And if I don't buy within the next couple months, then you know, Here we are in aisle 4 of Harris Teeter, and I'm learning about this person, right? Because I put myself out there as an agent. So my point to that is, anytime you're acting like an agent, you need to be prepared to do this disclosure at first substantial contact. And again, I'll talk more about that in just a second. We're going to look at the disclosure in just a second. And when we look at the disclosure, we're going to see that we can tell the consumer what agency options my firm offers. Remember last week we talked about the different agency options. So we can introduce the consumer. My firm offers, you know, dual agency, designated dual agency. Again, we'll see that in just a second. Understand, handing them the disclosure is not enough. We need to explain it to them. We need to give it, we need to review it to them. We can't just say, here you go, sign here. We have to explain it to them. We have to discuss it with them. And the Real Estate Commission says, once we provide and review the disclosure, at that time, we need to decide in what capacity we're going to work. Are you going to be my client? Are you going to be my customer? Are we never going to see each other again? Not all agency disclosures turn into a transaction. Some of them do. So we need to have the discussions about what capacity we're going to work, how we're going to work, what available options do I have for you? Let's say you're coming into my open. Well, hang on. We'll do that in just a second. Let me say something else first. So let's talk about this idea of first substantial contact. Again, like we were just saying, that time where the conversation switches gears from the property to the people, we've hit first substantial contact. And the big picture says, whenever we start discussing the consumer's price, term, or motive, PTM, I can't ask the buyer how much over asking price they're willing to go. The seller can't share with me how much under asking price they're willing to accept until we do agency disclosure, until we have that this conversation. Whenever you hit price, term, or motive, and guys, you need to, conversations and context clues here, right? Everybody's going to tell you, they find out you're licensed, everybody's going to tell you, ooh, I want to buy a house, or ooh, I want to sell a house. Does that mean anything? I mean, everybody's going to tell you that, right? What if somebody says, I have to buy within 2 months? Haven't I just learned something about their motivation? Haven't I just learned something? So I'm doing an open house on Sunday. A buyer comes into my open house. They walk in the front door. They look around. I say, do you have any questions? And they say, this is nice. I'm under a lot of pressure. I have to buy within 2 months because I'm relocating for a job. Stop talking. At that point, we've hit first substantial contact. I wasn't prepared for it. I just asked them if they had any questions. But at that point, we hit first substantial contact because I learned their motive. I learned that they have to buy within 2 months. It's never too early to do agency disclosure, but there is a time that it's too late. And when it's too late is when they start talking about their price, term, or motive. We sometimes have to interrupt people. We sometimes have to say, please stop talking. Mama raised me that it's rude to interrupt people when they're talking. And in this case, it's rude not to interrupt them. It is rude to not interrupt them. Let me share all their secrets, their price, term, and motive, and then say, oh, by the way, I represent the seller. I have to share that. I have to disclose what you just told me with my seller. If you were a buyer in my open house, would you be mad? Would you be upset with me because I let you share? Or would you rather I say, please stop talking. I need to explain agency with you. Not every buyer that comes into your open house is going to hit first substantial contact. Sometimes they come in and they look around and they say, what's a really nice kitchen? Thanks so much. Have a nice day. Okay, that's called their opinion, right? We can find them another nice kitchen somewhere else. We don't want to scare buyers off. We don't want to scare them off. Like you walk in the door of my open house and I say, hey, my name is Julie. We're going to do agency disclosure. Welcome to my open house. The buyer's going to turn around and run away, right? Buyers are like these skittish little creatures that scare easily. So we don't want to concern them. I want to let them feel welcome into my open house. But I always, whenever I'm acting as a capacity of an agent, I always need to be on alert for first substantial contact. Maybe it happens in my open house. Maybe you call off of my yard sign. I have a sign in the front yard with my name and phone number on it. Why? Because I want this thing to ring, right? I want you to call me. I had a listing a couple years ago, and my team has a number, and we all take turns answering the phone. So one of my teammates was on phones that day, and the lady called about my listing. She said, I'm calling about 123 Main Street, and I'm pre-approved for $150,000. We didn't even know the woman's name yet at this point, but did I know something about her that could affect her in the negotiations? When she made an offer less than 150, what do I have to tell my seller? I have to tell my seller, I know she's pre-approved for more, right? Because those were the first words out of her mouth. And I get what she was doing. She was proving to us that she was a serious buyer. And I appreciate that. But that's why this is our job to help educate the consumer. And agency disclosure, warning them, cautioning them, Mirandaizing them, if you will. Agency disclosure is one of the biggest places that we can help educate the consumer. So if first substantial contact happens in person, we talked about the open house. We talked about aisle 4 of Harris Teeter. We need to stop, let's go out in the parking lot and have a conversation, right? Or come over here in the kitchen and we'll talk about something. I carry agency disclosures around in my trunk. I'm ready to go at any time. In the event first substantial contact doesn't happen face-to-face, What if it happens by phone or electronic means? What if the consumer sends you an email? I'm pre-approved for X amount and I'm interested on your listing on 123 Main Street. We still discuss first substantial contact. Now we have 3 days to send them the form. So we still have a conversation with them. Thank you for sharing. I need you to understand. By you telling me that you're pre-approved for 150, my duty, my loyalty is to my seller. I tell you guys, my teammate, she handled it really well. The lady said, I'm 123 Main Street and I'm pre-approved for 150,000. My team said, whoa, you need to understand that we represent the seller, and what you share with us, we have a duty. We owe it to our seller to share with them. And that woman said, wow, I've called several listing firms and nobody has explained this to me. Everybody has just let me talk. So she was very appreciative. We educated her, we taught her something. And I hope the next few phone calls that she made, she wasn't just blurting out that information that could affect her in negotiations. Remember on day one, first day of class, I asked you guys if you had personal experiences of buying or selling, and several of your hands went up. I said, if you ever bought a house or sold a house. And my suggestion was that you take that experience and put it off to the side for this class, because we may talk about some things that you didn't experience. For those of you that are bought or sold a house, I'd be willing to bet that this is the conversation, agency disclosure, is something that you're not familiar with. And the reason being is because agents across the state don't do this right. Agents across the state don't provide this at first substantial contact. So the commission's coming down on us. It all starts with you guys. And the commission's coming down on us to make sure you guys understand the importance of getting this disclosure out to educate the consumer. And don't rely on, well, my agent didn't do it, so I'm not going to do it either. Because guys, bottom line, if you get yourself in trouble with the real estate commission and you say my agent didn't do it, do you think that's going to be an out for you? Do you think the commission's going to say, oh, wow, as long as your agent didn't do it, then you're fine? This is something across the state that all of us need to do better at. There was a story a couple of years ago. One of the commissioners, a daggum North Carolina real estate commissioner, was buying a house. Genuinely, he was buying a house down at the coast. And he and his wife went open housing one Sunday. And he went to an open house and struck up a conversation with the listing agent. And he reached a point that he felt we had hit first substantial contact. And the agent did not do her agency disclosure. And the commissioner said, is there anything you need to discuss with me? And she said, no. And he said, nothing you need to disclose to me? And she went, uh-uh. And he said, nothing, no brochure or information. No, we're good. He tried 3 times to get her to do agency disclosure. And he said, well, dear, who's your broker in charge? Because as the commissioner, he knew she finally, y'all, listen to what the people are telling you. When somebody's standing in your open house going, nothing to disclose, shouldn't a flag have gone up for her? Shouldn't a little red flag gone up with her or something about disclosure? You'll get training when you join your firms. They'll spend time with you. You'll get, I hate role playing. I feel so dumb when I'm role playing, but role playing helps put words in your mouth. And when you role play with your peers, it's preparing you for the consumer. I promise you, the first couple times you do agency disclosure, it's going to be bumpy and awkward. You're going to be like, duh, no confidentiality, but I can be your agent. So sign it, right? It's not going to sound good the first couple times you do it. How do you get better at it? You do it again and again and again and again. You start practicing with your firm. We're going to look at the disclosure in just a second. One more thing. Can I make anybody do anything? Can I force anybody to sign this form? Unfortunately, no. I only got Zoom power, right? I don't have power over people anywhere else, just on Zoom. So if I'm out my open house, if the consumer refuses to sign, then all I can do is say, you know, refuse to sign January 25th, da, da, da. I just make notation that I tried. And I keep that in my records for 3 years. My firm uses a program called Dot Loop, and it's like our e-signatures, e-documents, the e-world. And I have a folder right now in my Dot Loop called WWREA 2022. So any working with real estate agent that I get this year goes into that folder. Again, maybe it turns into a transaction again. Maybe I'll never see this person again. But I'm telling you guys, if you get a complaint, if somebody files a complaint, the real estate commission, and they send you that letter of inquiry we talked about last week, I promise you, no matter what the complaint is about, the real estate commission will ask for your agency disclosure and your agency agreement if applicable. And if you don't have an agency disclosure, they're going to say, do you have any agency disclosures? Let me see all of your agency disclosures from 2021. Don't cause them to launch an investigation. Okay. I showed one of my listing once to a lady. She called, she was interested in seeing it. I met her at the house. I decided, since I was getting ready to spend some time with her inside and, you know, probably ask her some questions, learn about her, I decided to do my working with real estate agents before we walked in the front door. There's never a time where it's too early to do it, but there is a time where it's too late. So I went over my disclosure. I had the discussion and I said, if I can just get you to sign here. And she looked at me and she said, I just met you. I'm not signing anything you give me. Fair enough. Fair enough. Real estate agents sometimes have a reputation of being pushy salesmen. Sometimes we're up there with used car salesmen. I understand the public is a little, I hate to say sketchy, but their guards are up, right? They hear stories and they hear rumors. And I get it. And I said, I understand. Let's go look at the house. You know, never saw that woman again, ever. What if she would have turned into a buyer client for me? Just because she refused to sign the disclosure doesn't mean I can't work with her. It's not like I'm going to say, oh, well, have a nice day and turn around and get back in my car, right? Just because she refused to sign doesn't hurt our future relationship. I can still make that available to her. I can still try to have that conversation. And if she would have turned into a buyer client, when she was ready to sign that buyer agency agreement, I would have presented this to her again. So now I would have had two, one that says she refused to sign, and then the other one once she signed, once I built that trust. What questions do I have so far on working with real estate agents? No? So far, so good?
I have one.
Yeah.
If the agent fails to disclose any information, that's what it's the willful omission.
This is not disclosing material facts. This is disclosing
Okay.
my relationship. Thank you.
Okay.
There's a very big distinction there. I don't care if you sign this or not, right? I have a duty to tell you that the roof leaks, right? This is me disclosing me.
Okay.
This is me disclosing my relationship.
Okay.
I got a question in the chat. Would it be easier to get disclosures after building rapport? Yes, it would be easier, but the rule says we do agency disclosure at first substantial contact. So you're going to hit first substantial contact before you build rapport, if that makes sense. Would it be easier? Yeah, probably. But we need to know what the rule says. So do I have to get them to sign the brochure? I'm going to try, but if they refuse to sign, I actually write refused to sign January 25th. So when you guys are, I don't like the word try in parentheses. I owe it to the consumer. And even if they refuse to sign it, I still have to have a conversation with them that I represent the seller. I still need to let them know that I don't know them confidentiality. So just because they refuse to sign doesn't mean I'm going to say, oh, well, there was your chance, right? I still have to make sure I'm protecting them. This isn't about me. I'm protecting them. Yeah, Bean?
Is it a good idea when you're handing them the brochure to emphasize this is not a contract?
So it is. It is. And the form, as we're looking at right here, helps us with that, because what's one of the first things out of the form's mouth?
This is not a contract.
This is not a contract. So when we look at this in just a second, guys, remember the forms are here to help you put words in your mouth. So the form, and that lady, I said, well, it says right here, it's not a contract. She said, nope, I'm not signing it. I said, okay. I mean, I tried. Did I still explain it to her? Of course I did. Ma'am, as we walk in this front door, you need to understand that I represent the seller. And if you bring an offer to this table, you need to understand that whatever you share with me, I have a duty to my seller client to share with them. Talking to me is just like talking directly to my seller. So even though she doesn't sign it, I'm still going to say, oh, well, you know, I still have to try to make her sure she understands. So let me ask you this real quick. Somebody comes in your open house, they're talking about the property, the kitchen's real nice, da, 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 da. And then the conversation switches gears and they say, well, I'm pre-approved for X amount and I'm willing to go $30,000 over asking price and I got to buy within 2 months. Okay, I just let them go too far right there, right? I should have stopped them earlier in that sentence. But my point is, people, blows my mind, y'all. People just talk. Da, 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 da. And it's like they got to get it out first, right? And that's why sometimes we actually have to interrupt them. And it's for their protection. So buyer comes in and he says, I'm pre-approved. Whoa, 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 whoa. Please allow me 1 second to explain what you share with me. I have to share with my seller. Anything else you tell me, I have to share with my seller. If you bring an offer, here's our working with real estate agent disclosure, da, 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 da. Sign here. Buyer signs and then says, okay, so anyway, I have to move within 2 months and I'm willing to go $30,000 over asking price. At that point, I need to break out my notepad and my pen and take notes to share with my seller. Because once I disclose it once, if they choose to keep talking, my duty's still to my seller. So if they say, yeah, whatever, blah, 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 and keep talking, I've already explained it. I got them to sign something. Question came in for your records. Do you put the name on the form? Sure. That's not required, but I do just because I'm a little. So I would put, you know, Cassandra Craig refused to sign January 25th. Just have to write, notate, and still have this conversation. So what we're looking at here is our agency disclosures. And I got to tell you guys, this used to look different. They changed the look of this last July. Look with me in your book on page 167 and 168. It was like a big brochure. It folded out like, I don't know how many panels it was. Now I know you can't read 167 and 168. So what they did on pages 169 to 173 is blew up what you're looking at 167 and 168. Everybody with me? So 167, 168 is an image of the brochure that we used to have. And then the information on those 2 pages is 169 to 173. Understand, although the look of it has changed, that's all that changed. The rule didn't change, the law didn't change, the verbiage didn't change. So it would do you guys good to look at 169, 170, 171, 172, because that's information that helps us explain this to the consumer. So in July, they changed the look of it and they simplified it for us. On about July 1st of last year, if you happened statewide, I don't care where you were, but if you woke up to a woohoo across the state and you wondered what that celebrating was, that was every single real estate agent in North Carolina celebrating the fact that we no longer had to do this brochure on 167 and 168. And they provide us now with the disclosure that we're looking at in Learn, Test, Pass, which is so much easier. Thank you, Forms Committee and Real Estate Commission, for simplifying things for us. This is much, much easier to discuss. So we have 2 forms now. There's a working with real estate agent disclosure for the seller, and there's one for the buyer. It tells us this form is required in all sales transactions, including residential and commercial. Commercial tends to be a problem topic. Commercial sales is sales. Yes? So it's residential sales and it's commercial sales. Off the bat, this tells us this form is not a contract. All you're doing when you sign the disclosure means that you've received it. We're not committed to anything. We're not in any kind of relationship. The only thing you're doing by signing it is acknowledging receipt, because it's not a contract. It's not an agency agreement. In real estate sales transaction, it is important that you understand whether an agent represents you. Real estate agents are required to review this form with you at first substantial contact before asking for or receiving confidential information, and give you a copy of the form after you sign it. This is for your own protection. And then it says, do not share any confidential information with the agent or assume, I hate that word, assume, that the agent is acting on your behalf until you have entered into a written agreement with the agent that represents you. Otherwise, check it out. The agent can share your confidential information with others. So when you're doing the disclosure, oh, what do I say? What do I say? That pretty much sums it up nicely for us, doesn't it? I don't owe you confidentiality. Don't share anything with me until you decide to hire me. Then the form goes on to explain the different types of agency that the firm may offer. It's not a matter of whether or not this is the kind of agency we're going to do, right? We talked about different types of agency last week. What we're asking here is the agent check the box for the type of agency that the firm offers. So for example, if your firm doesn't offer designated dual agency, then you're not going to check that box. It doesn't mean you're committing to a dual agency relationship. You're just telling the consumer, this is something my firm offers. I'll let you guys go through and read that. And then the last option here is if you're presenting to an unrepresented seller, also known as a for sale by owner. Doesn't that for sale by owner have a right to know that the buyer's your client? Doesn't that for sale by owner have a right to know that my loyalty is to the buyer? So anything you share with me, and that's what we're disclosing to the for sale by owner. Just because they're FSBO, that the FSBO is the customer. And what do I owe my customer? Let's do it with me. Honesty, fairness, and the disclosure of material facts. So to be fair to my customer, to the FSBO, we do our agency disclosure. And then here's a place, everybody sign, seller sign, agent's name. If you're in person, just a trick. If you're in person, you can always snap a picture of it for your records and let them walk away with the hard copy, right? Just a suggestion. You need one and they need one. So however you can do that, snapping a picture of it tends to help. So that was for the seller. We also have one for the buyer. So who are you talking to? A consumer that's selling or a consumer that's buying? Go through the same. This is not a contract. Don't share any confidential information. Does my firm offer buyer agency? Does my firm offer dual agency, offer designated dual agency? Or is my firm going to offer seller subagent? A seller subagent means the buyer is the customer, right? Why? Because the buyer is unrepresented. And then a place for the buyer and the seller to sign. In addition to the disclosure, the Real Estate Commission has provided us with a Q&A brochure. Again, I'll let you guys look at this. Because it's a brochure, and if we were actually looking at it, it would fold up into a nice, tight little pamphlet. It actually starts on the second page is the beginning. But what I like about this a whole lot, again, you guys use the forms to help put words in your mouth. So when you're not sure what to say to give your agency disclosure, they provide you with a Q&A brochure. And it starts with talking about, what's the first thing it says? Do not share any confidential information with the agent or assume that the agent is acting on your behalf. We're trying our hardest to warn the public, I don't owe you this confidentiality if you don't hire me. This brochure, it goes, what does the word agency mean? What is an agency agreement? Again, use this form to help explain this to the consumer when you're meeting with them. Here's a Q&A for sellers. So if you're talking with a seller, you can just point them in this direction. What are the agent's listing duties, etc. And again, I'll let you guys look at this. I think this is another good way for you to review dual agency and designated dual agency. What is the risk if I agree to dual agency? How do I reduce the risk of dual agency? So it's another way for you guys to expose yourself to this information. And then the first of page 1, we have a Q&A for buyers. So again, whoever you're talking to, are you talking to a buyer consumer or a seller consumer, you can kind of gear your direction, gear your energy towards that person. Over on page 2, we're still talking about Q&A working with buyers. Termination of agency agreement, how it ends. And then this is what made me really happy. They gave us pictures. Y'all know by now how I feel about pictures. The pictures were new as of July 1st. People understand pictures. And I'm so happy that they gave us pictures because this helps us better explain it to the consumer. So now we're explaining to the consumer. We have buyer agency and seller agency option. You see how broker A is a different color than broker B? That's indicating there were 2 different firms. So broker A with one firm is holding the hand of the buyer. Broker B with a different firm is holding the hand of the seller. That's buyer agency and seller sub-agency. When we get into dual agency, the firm is both holding hands with the buyer and the seller. We get into designated dual agency. Look, the agents are still holding hands. Yes, the firm is still holding hands, but now one agent is holding hands with the buyer, different agents holding hands with the seller. And then what I said, that was dual agency, sorry. One agent or 2 agents in dual, there it is. One agent acting as dual agent or 2 agents. And then in designated, still the same firm, still the same color, but now they're not holding hands anymore. Do we love pictures? I love pictures. And this absolutely helps. You guys know at some point, you're going to have to explain all this to consumers, right? As you're sitting here trying to wrap your brain around it, where you're heading is at some point, this is going to be you. So this helps the consumer. This helps the agent put words in their mouths. We all love pictures, I hope, and it helps us better explain it to the consumer. Again, you guys across the state, we were so thrilled with the changes they made to the disclosure and the Q&A brochure. So let's see, I got a couple questions. Question comes in, is this something we do in representing the buyer? Not representing the buyer, but first meeting the buyer, first meeting the seller, first substantial contact. Could that working with real estate agent disclosure eventually turn into an agency agreement? Well, fingers crossed, right? Are all of them going to turn into an agency agreement? No. So all buyers, whether or not I get to represent them or not, all consumers in a sales transaction, whether or not I get to work with them or not. So let's see. Thank you, Amin. There's some tips on record keeping, which is always helpful. Barney level. Pictures help. Look at all the light bulbs turning on because of pictures. I wish I had 50 more minutes on Thursday because we would have gotten through this, but we're here now, so that's an important thing. So let's see, if a person does not sign for you to be their buyer's agent, but you're helping them as a sub-agent of the seller, do you still make the same commission? So that's it. So now we're back to seller sub-agency. So your firm represents, or a firm represents the seller. And then an agent, maybe with the firm, maybe not, brings the buyer customer. That's seller sub-agency. How much are you going to get paid? Remember, the seller pays the listing firm. The listing firm shares their commission with whomever's bringing the buyer. So how much are you going to get paid? It's all spelled out in the listing agreement. We'll see when we look at the listing agreement, it says the listing firm expects to collect X amount. Of that X amount, I'm going to share, 30% with whomever brings me the buyer. May that be as a buyer's agent or a seller subagent. So we're going to get into commission in just a second or later today. But yeah, I'm 172 as a seller subagent. Remember, we saw in MLS, not all firms work with buyer customers. So if the MLS says buyer's agent only, then that means the only way you can show that house is if you have a buyer client. The listing firm and the seller is telling you, do not bring me your buyer customer. So we'll see that again.
Can I ask a question, Julie?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so this disclosure is all just about saying that you are who you are and make your role known to them. So
And
what
the most important thing is not sharing anything confidential. Yep.
Right. So what happens in the event that there's a situation that occurs that they did share confidential information? You gave them this disclosure, and then they later on say, okay, well, I never received it, and they didn't sign off on it. That doesn't really protect you if they don't have, technically, they don't have to sign this form. So how would that work?
Agree. So now, well, all we have is where I wrote refuse to sign, and now it goes down to the real estate commission, and they're just going to have to, who do they believe? Do they believe you or them? Because now we're into he said, she said thing, right? So this is why we're trying to get them to sign, understanding that I can't make everybody sign. The more signatures you get, the better you're protected, right? But if they refuse to sign, the best thing I can do to protect myself is write Essence tab, refuse to sign, January 25th, 953 at 123 Main Street, right? It's still my word against his. But remember what we said last week. What do I document? I document everything. So if they refuse, and then the commission might say, all right, Julie, let's say you're this person, Essence, refused to sign. Show me your other working with real estate agents. So I go and I pull out a whole stack where 5 out of 6 say refuse to sign. Does it look like I'm really trying? Does it look like I'm really, really trying to get everybody signed? Or am I just saying, whatever, refuse to sign, let's go on, right? So that might be the kind of thing the commission does, is to dig a little deeper. Because one thing we can learn about future behavior is past patterns, right? So if I have a history of not getting anybody to sign, my case isn't going to stand up in this situation. Does that make sense? So have a good track record, have a good paper trail. Rebecca says you explain it, let them know by signing. We were just discussing, works most of the time. I agree. Again, once you guys get your little, I call it your elevator pitch. Once you get your disclosure spiel down pat, the big thing that the consumer understands is we're not entering into a contract. We're not entering into a contract, which is why, and I mean, they underline it, show them this. Seller, this is not a contract. What if they don't give them your name? I would not meet a stranger at a property if I don't know their name. Right now, what if they come into my open house? I can ask, but they don't have to tell me. So then I just have to say, gentleman came into open house. I get it. Not everybody likes, because again, you guys, agents have a reputation of being pushy salesmen sometimes. It takes one bad experience to ruin it going forward, right? So if I can get their name, great. If not, I just have to put on here, let's get out of this what if trail. I put on this form whatever I can do to best protect myself. As much information on here as I can, but specifically saying refuse to sign. That's what the commission wants to see. Refuse to sign. Anything else you put on here is okay to protect yourself. Okay. And Rebecca, thank you. I love what you said. Once you learn how to disclose it, once you learn how to get it out, it's, you know, you wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth, right? Once you learn this, once you get it out, you meet somebody, you do agency disclosure. It just becomes one of those things, but you got to get your elevator, your elevator spiel down pat. Cause I promise you, the first couple of times you do it, you're going to be like, what did I just say? So you learn and you practice, do some role playing. All right. It's break time. So let's take 10. We come back. I got a little bit more to talk about agency disclosure, and then we're going to wrap up unit 7. Okay. I mean, that's an old hand, yes? Before break hand? Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you. Okay. So camera's on. Welcome back. I'll say a little bit more about agency disclosure, and then we are about ready to wrap up Unit 7 and move on to Unit 8. Just if I could say a few more things about this idea of first substantial contact. There are specific rules in place. License law and commission rule. Remember Appendix A in your book, you guys have been asked to start looking at the comments to going through that section in the back of your book. And that's the law and the rule. So just to talk about this first substantial contact, when to disclose, let's make sure we know what the rule says. Commission rule says if you are meeting a prospective buyer or seller for the first time. So maybe a buyer comes into my open house and we hit first substantial contact, or I'm going on a listing appointment and we hit first substantial contact. I have to do my agency disclosure then. We're going to talk more about working with buyers and sellers in Unit 8. If you're a seller's agent or a seller's sub-agent and you're communicating with the buyer, again, the rule says we do our agency disclosure at first substantial contact. So this is the example. The second bullet point is the example of, buyer coming into my open house, for example. This third bullet point is a little different. If you are a buyer's agent and you are communicating with a seller or seller's agent, I have to disclose my agency status at initial contact. So let's talk for a second the difference between first substantial contact and initial contact. Initial contact is, hi, my name is Julie Campbell. The first time we meet, the first time I encounter you about this transaction, I got to tell you that I'm a buyer's agent when I first reach out to you. So let's say, for example, you're a buyer's agent and your buyer calls you and says, hey, can we go see 123 Main Street this afternoon? And you say, of course. And your buyer says, before we go, is there any way I have a specific question. Is there any way I can get some information? You say, sure. So you call the listing agent. I'm a buyer's agent calling the listing agent. I call the listing agent and I say, hi, my name is Julie Campbell. I'm working with a buyer that's interested in your listing at 123 Main Street, and they have a question. Didn't I just disclose who I was? The only other thing I got out of my mouth was my name. So as soon as and that's just being polite, right? So as soon as I told him my name, I told him my role, I disclosed my status and told them why I was calling. I'm calling because I'm working with a buyer that's interested in your property. Let's say the buyer wants to see 123 Main Street, but they don't have a question. Here in the Triad, I can't speak for anywhere outside, but here in the Triad, we use a program called Showing Time. And Showing Time is a centralized showing system. So when I want to schedule a showing, I can go into Showing Time, and Showing Time will communicate with the seller, the seller's agents to get the showing appointment scheduled. I go into Showing Time to schedule us to see 123 Main Street this afternoon, and I have to select my role. Am I a buyer's agent or am I a seller sub-agent? I have to disclose my status at that time. The seller and the seller's agent will get an email that'll say, Julie Campbell, comma, buyer's agent, comma, wants to see your home today at 2 o'clock. So the first communication they have from me says that I'm a buyer's agent. The rules go on to say that we eventually have to put this in writing. When we get into Unit 10, we're going to look at our offer to purchase and contract. In Unit 10, I actually check my role. Am I a buyer's agent? Am I a seller sub-agent? Am I a dual agent? We actually have to disclose our status. And that's how we get this initial contact in writing, is when I'm going to present an offer. Again, we'll see all of this in our license law and commission rule. Please be reading those comments in Appendix A, a little bit at a time. But all the agency agreements and relationships and disclosures that we just talked about in Unit 7 are repeated again in Appendix A in that comment section. So the question came in, is initial contact correct? So the only time you do initial contact is when you're a buyer's agent communicating with a seller or seller's agent. All other times you do first substantial contact. FSC is first substantial contact. Good. The comments, good. It's another way to put it. You do not need to know the rule numbers. I put them there to prove to you that it's official. I'm not just over here talking. This is straight from the commission. Okay. Got one more thing to say about agency disclosure, and that's agency disclosure and auction sales. Again, you guys, please listen to me for 1 second. Auction sales are a totally different category. Put auction sales in an entirely different bucket from any other kind of sales. Agency disclosure is not required for auction sales. The only time you need to worry about auction sales for your exam is if a question specifically says auction sales. If a question specifically asks about auction sales, then answer, it's not required. Agency disclosure is not required. All other questions, pretend that auctions don't exist. Only worry about auctions unless you're specifically asked about auctions. Questions on agency disclosure, first substantial contact. Okay. And thank you, Christina, for sharing that about the comments. I believe one of the first sentences of the comment says, this information is not only helpful for your exam, but it's helpful for real life too, or one or the other, something along those lines. So, you know, even the comments are telling you that the comments are important. Okay. All right. Remember earlier we said that buyers are like these scared, timid little creatures. They scare easy, and you know, it's the last thing I want. I'm not a pushy person, and I'm certainly not a pushy salesman. And the last thing I want is to scare a buyer away. So because of buyers' time that it takes to form relationships, to build that trust, the Real Estate Commission will allow us to work with a buyer or a tenant under an oral buyer agency agreement at first. We can work with a buyer or a tenant under an oral buyer agency agreement or an oral tenant agency agreement at first. And the reason for this is because the commission understands that we may need to build our trust with these buyers. Could you imagine if you were buying a house and you went to an open house and you said, wow, this is nice, I think I like this. And the agent said, great, what's your name? Let's get a buyer's agency agreement. I need you to sign here, here, and here, day here. Would you not turn around and run away? So we have the option to work with a buyer under an oral buyer agency agreement at first. Please listen to me. An oral buyer agency agreement is an agency agreement. An oral buyer agency agreement is an agency agreement. So under an oral buyer agency agreement, what do I owe that buyer? What do I owe that buyer under an oral buyer agency agreement? I love the question marks. Yeah. You guys got it. Under an oral buyer agency agreement, I owe that buyer OCAR. Why? Because it's an agency agreement. Remember last week, we talked about express versus implied. And we said if something is express, the terms have been laid out, is clearly stated. So under an oral buyer agency agreement, I'm still acting like their buyer's agent. I'm still discussing our relationship. I'm still telling them what duties I owe them. I'm still talking about dual agency. It's express. Express can be in oral or in writing. The key to express is that the terms have been clearly stated and spelled out. So the buyer says, eek, I'm a little hesitant. I just met you. You seem really nice, but I'm just a little hesitant to enter into an agency agreement with you. Great. Let's work under an oral buyer agency at first. And then we're still going to explain what that happens. And let me ask you guys this. What do we document? We document what? Every stinking thing, right? So if I have this conversation with the buyer face to face, wouldn't I want to go home and follow it up with an email? Wouldn't I want to document that I had this conversation? Because I don't have anything in writing just yet. It's only oral. We sat and had the discussion. So now I go home and I send an email talking about per our conversation. This is the kind of agency relationship we're in. This is what I owe you, dual agency, da 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 da. I'm not getting anything in writing. I'm just covering my butt at that case, at that time. So the real estate commission says they will allow us to work with a buyer under an oral buyer agency agreement at first. So when do we have to get that in writing? The latest I have to work with a buyer under an oral buyer agency agreement at first is when I'm ready to present the offer on the buyer's behalf. I cannot present an offer as a buyer's agent. I cannot present the offer on the buyer's behalf without reducing my oral buyer agency agreement to writing. You can get it in as early as you want to. Guys, there are agents out there and there are firms out there that will not do this. They will not work with a buyer under an oral buyer agency agreement. If you don't sign, have a nice day. But remember, your test is not going to ask you what you're going to do. Your test is going to ask you what you can do. So can you work with a buyer under an oral buyer agency agreement at first? Can you? Yes. Must get it in writing before you're presenting the offer. Are we good with the difference between writing an offer and presenting an offer? If I'm writing an offer, I'm gathering the terms, filling in the blanks, I'm getting my buyer to sign it. When I'm presenting the offer, I'm actually emailing it to the listing agent. I'm calling the listing agent and say, hey, got an offer coming your way. So there's a difference. Again, how does your test like to trick you? There's going to be an answer choice that says writing an offer, but what you're looking for is presenting an offer. There's some caveats to oral buyer agency. It can't be exclusive. In agency relationships, in agency agreements, exclusivity is a one-way street. Let me ask you this. If you're dating somebody exclusively, how many people should you be dating? Hopefully, you're saying just one. So if you're dating somebody exclusively, you should only be dating one person. Exclusivity is a one-way street. If the buyer is exclusive, that means the buyer's only dating one firm. The firm is free to date as many buyers as they want to, right? I mean, think about it. If you had an office with 500 agents and we could only have one buyer, that means 499 agents don't have a buyer, right? That just doesn't work. So exclusivity is a one-way street. I cannot demand exclusivity under an oral buyer agency agreement. If I look at this buyer and say, we're going to be exclusive, or you're going to be exclusive to me, I got to get it in writing. We cannot have an exclusive oral agreement. And the other caveat is that an oral buyer agency agreement cannot be for a specific period of time. So under an oral agreement, I can't say, you're going to work with me and only me for 2 weeks. Or you're going to work with me for 2 weeks. If I want to put a time frame on it, or if I want to demand exclusivity, then I have to get it in writing. The whole reason the commission allows us to do this is to build that rapport, build that reputation. It may take me showing you a few homes to realize that you can trust me. It may take us spending time together. It may take more than a 1-hour buyer consultation before you realize that you can trust me. So this is an option that they gave us if you choose. Again, not all agents practice this, not all firms, but that's not what your test is going to ask you. Everybody good with this? Questions on this? Let's look, let's go back for 1 second.
Sorry, Julie.
Yeah,
Is it normal for maybe a firm to require their agents to reduce everything to writing? Or
at
is
the
that all?
beginning.
Sorry?
I mean, I don't know about normal. Some firms do, some firms don't.
Okay.
Some firms will not allow this. Some agents say no, because think about it. If it's not exclusive, this buyer could be talking to several different agents, right? I have heard incidences before where buyers have talked to like 3 agents, 3 different firms, and have said, this is what I'm looking for. The first one to find it for me wins. Go. So you don't have to do this. The commission allows you to do this. Some firms do, some firms don't. Some agents do, some agents don't. Focus on what your test is going to ask you. Does the real estate commission allow you to work under an oral buyer agency agreement at first? And the answer is yes. We touched on this the other day before we left. Let's go back to page 162 and 163. I think these situations, if you guys haven't looked at these yet, please make another note to look at them. Because dual agency can happen under an oral buyer agency. I don't have to put it in writing until I'm ready to present the offer. So under an oral buyer agency agreement, I can show you the property, I can write the offer up, but I still have to discuss dual agency before we do it. And the question always comes up, can people change their mind about dual agency? And the answer is sure. These situations on 162 and 163 help us learn how we can change. And bottom line, what you're looking at, if the buyer's in oral and the seller's in writing, then we can change orally. If both parties are in writing, I can only change in writing. And that's what your situations are working you through here on 162 and 163. What if you had a seller that says no to dual? You have a seller that says no to dual, and then you have an oral buyer that shows up. Maybe you've been on the market for 6 months and your seller's frustrated and they're just ready to sell. You have an oral buyer that shows up that orally says yes to dual. Seller says no to dual. I can't show that property until the seller agrees to change, right? If the seller agrees to change their no to yes, now I can show the property. But if they're digging their heels in and say, no, Julie, I'm not doing dual, I can't show that buyer that property. That's what dual says. But what if the seller says, oh my God, I just want to sell, whatever, bring anybody in, I don't care. Can I have your oral consent to change? Can I have an email, something, have your oral consent to change? And then when I'm presenting the offer, we got to get that change on the listing agreement. But the reason the seller could change their mind over the phone is because the buyer said yes orally to dual. And those are the situations you're looking at on 162 and 163. So make sure you look at those. So what if? I hear you guys. I'm ready for you. Julie, what if I'm ready to present an offer under an oral buyer agency agreement and the buyer says, no, I'm not signing that. If I don't have it in writing, can I present the offer for them? If I don't have it in writing, what does the rule say? If I don't have it in writing, I can't present the offer, right? So what if the seller says, nope, I'm not signing it? Well, we got choices. If they refuse to sign it, I can no longer represent them as a buyer client. If I'm ready to present an offer on their behalf and they refuse to sign, I got to downgrade them from a client to a customer. They need to understand what being downgraded means. Most importantly, they need to understand that if I downgrade them from a client to a customer, my loyalty is now to the seller. So buyer, remember everything you told me when we were out for the last 5 weeks looking at property? You remember? I now have a duty to share that to my seller because you didn't want to be a client. You decided you didn't want to sign this. So if they refuse to sign, I cannot represent them as a client, which means I cannot present their offer on their behalf. If they agree to this, they need to understand. Don't just assume that they know that my loyalty switches to the seller. We need to have this discussion. What if they say, well, no, I don't want to be downgraded. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. For the last 5 weeks, I've been your client. Now all of a sudden, oh, you need to be my customer. Guys, I only have 2 legal capacities to work with people. Either you're my client, you're my customer. And if you refuse either one, I'm out. I have no other legal alternative. So if you say, I'm not signing this, nor am I happy with me being your customer, I'm out. How much time would you give them to sign? You know, and what if I tell them, they're like, look, while you're deciding if you want to do this, another buyer could swoop in and make an offer, take your dream home. Are you ready to sign this? Because I can't move forward until you sign this or you agree to downgrade. I'm going to work on my artistic skills. Another option we may have, when we look at our buyer's agency agreement, Unit 8, we're going to see that I have the option to do a written buyer's agency agreement for one property. So if this buyer were here, they found their dream home, they want to make an offer, they don't want to be a client, they don't want to be a customer. Okay, all right. How about this? How about I'm your buyer's agent for and only for 123 Main Street? If it works out, you have representation. If it doesn't, you don't. It's pretty simple. So we can try to get them to sign. Question came in, why did they refuse to sign? Maybe they still don't trust me. Maybe they don't think that they have to sign. Real estate's one of those industries where a lot of people think they know how to do your job better than you do because they've watched HGTV and they got this. So why would they refuse to sign? Because they never saw anybody sign on HGTV. So why do I have to sign? Turn it off. If you're still watching HGTV, what I heard another instructor the other day use an analogy. Wanting to be a real estate agent because you watch HGTV is like wanting to be a lawyer after watching Legally Blonde. You with me? Turn it off. So oral dual agency, this is where we were on 162, 163. We can change orally if one party has agreed orally. So if the seller has said no in writing and the buyer has said yes orally, I can change the seller's mind in writing to allow that showing, to allow that buyer in. And if that buyer presents an offer, then we have to get the seller to change in writing before we present the offer. If both parties have said yes or no to dual in writing and then they change their mind, I have to have both parties change in writing. So again, pretty much what we're saying is if both parties have said one way or the other in writing and they want to change their mind, I got to get both parties to change their mind in writing. If one is in writing and one is oral, I can get both to change their mind orally. And those, again, those are those situations on 162, 163. We will see oral buyer agency again, Unit 8. I had another, everybody please look with me. I apologize. I should have done this earlier. Please look with me on page 707. Everybody, please turn to page 707. 707 is the license law and rule comments. This is the section of Appendix A I would like you guys to focus on. The commission thinks you should read all of Appendix A. I'm asking you to only focus on the comments. You're welcome to read the whole thing. Is everybody good with that? We talk about willful misrepresentation. We talk about material facts, talk about agency disclosure, agency agreements. Page 707 and the comments end on page 728. 707 to 728. We talked about, I thought we talked about breaking this up into chunks. This is not an easy read. So that's why I'm asking you guys to start now. We're going to talk about this. The last thing in class we talk about is license law and commission rule. That's what, 5 weeks away, something like that, give or take, 6 maybe. No. The whole section starting on page 707 is the comments. Do you see at the very top where it says license law and rules comments? So every word on page 707 to 7, what did I just say? 728. That's what, 20 pages, 21 pages? And as one of your peers just came in, again, thank you for the peer review. One of your peers read this weekend and said that it helped. That's not Julie talking. That's your peer. Thank you again for sharing. You don't want to listen to me, and you don't want to listen to the real estate commission. Listen to Christina. Okay, the last thing to wrap up Unit 7, talking a little bit about the nature of the brokerage business. The broker in charge is the broker that's just that. They are the one in charge of the office. Every office location has to have a broker in charge. So if you have a firm with multiple locations, maybe they have a High Point branch, a Greensboro branch, and a Winston-Salem branch. How many BICs do they have? They have 3 because they have one under each roof, right? So every office location needs a broker in charge. We're going to talk more about the BIC's responsibilities when we get into license law and commission rule. Probably one of the BIC's biggest responsibilities is soon to be you guys. You guys are PBs or provisional brokers. PB is provisional brokers. I call you guys brokers with training wheels. Guys, they're not going to hand you a license and let you run amok on the streets. They're going to make sure you get extra guidance, extra training, extra education. Post-licensing is one of those. We'll talk more about post-licensing. But as a provisional broker, if you affiliate with a firm as a provisional broker, your broker in charge is agreeing to take you under their wing. Everything you do as a provisional broker will be in your broker insurance. Your BIC will be in your back pocket. They'll be supervising, they'll be monitoring, they'll be making sure that you get started off on the right foot so you can have a long career. If the provisional broker gets in trouble with the commission, if the provisional broker gets the letter of inquiry, the provisional broker will take their broker in charge down with them. So if the PB gets in trouble with the commission, so does the BIC. Because the commission is going to say, BIC, if you were doing your job, this may not have happened. If a full-blown broker gets in trouble, a non-PB gets in trouble with the commission, it depends on if their BIC will get in trouble as well. It depends. If it's an agency violation, yeah, the BIC's going to get in trouble too. Each office's broker in charge is responsible for all the actions of the brokers in their firm. Again, agency, for example, trust accounts. We're going to talk about trust accounts and license law and commission rule. Are BICs generally owners of that office? Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're just employees of the company. They're hired to be the boss. You guys going into real estate, for the most part, are going to be going in as an independent contractor instead of an employee. Most sales agents, pretty much. Most sales agents go in as an independent contractor. An independent contractor says, you work for who? I work for me. As an independent contractor, you don't get hired by a firm. You affiliate with a firm. Probably one of the biggest difference between the employee and the independent contractor is how you get paid. The employee gets the W-2 where taxes are withheld from each month, each pay. The independent contractor gets a 1099, which means taxes aren't withheld. Rest assured, as an independent contractor, at the end of the year, Uncle Sam is still standing there with his hand out going, where's my cut? Uncle Sam's going, wow, Julie, you had a great year. That's awesome. Pay up. Anybody an independent contractor with another industry right now? I usually have quite a few. If going into real estate, or even not, but everybody, their first year in real estate as an independent contractor may want to consider hiring an accountant your first year, because your accountant can tell you how much of your commission check to set aside for taxes. That's painful if you don't know to do that. That just hurts. Accountants can tell you guys like that certain things are tax write-offs. Part of your business is tax write-offs. So I always suggest your first year in real estate as an independent contractor, you get with an accountant, at least your first year. You get with an accountant to make sure you're taking advantage of the tax write-offs, the things that you can. Employees are paid salary hourly. Independent contractors are usually commission-based, which means you get paid when it closes. The employee, you know, most of your firms are staffed with unlicensed employees. And the BIC gets to say, you punch in at 9 o'clock, you take lunch from 12 to 1, you punch out at 5, right? The employee dictates work hours, conditions. The BIC may control how the independent contractor, they may control what they do, but they can't control how they do it. You know, as an independent contractor, I don't know, I'm not gonna lie. Let's be honest. Some mornings working from home in your PJs, that's not terrible at all. That's a good time, actually. Get you a cup of coffee, stay in your PJs, get all your work done. But guys, here's the thing. My BIC is not calling me every day and saying, Julie, did you make your 5 phone calls today? Julie, did you do your prospecting today? Julie, did you do your job today? Because my BIC, I work for me. But I have to know that if I don't make 5 phone calls today, I'm not trying to get prospects and get that business. Does that make sense? If you don't do the work, you're not going to get the business. So hopefully that's motivation for you to prospect or do whatever it is that you need to do today. I mean, suggest using a CPA. So good. Thank you. Has anybody started talking to real estate firms yet? Anybody talk to any BICs or brokers or anything? A couple of you. You may want to start kind of searching around for firms in your area. Kind of searching for what firms you want to possibly affiliate with. I always suggest that you guys talk to 2 or 3 firms before you affiliate, because every firm is different. Every compensation plan is different. Every firm offers different training, different education, different apprenticeship or mentorship. Please hear me when I say this. They are all different. And the only way for you to know which one is the best fit for you is to talk to 2 or 3. Have something to compare and contrast. So if you haven't, it can't hurt you to talk to anybody now. They're not going to bring you on until you're licensed, of course. But it can't hurt you to start searching around. Some of you may want a big national branded firm. Some of you may want a small mom and pop. Some of you may not know the difference. And maybe you want to talk to one of each. If I were you guys, as new licensees coming out of real estate, the number one question I would have for your future firms, more importantly than commission at this point, the number one question I would have if I were you that I would have is, what kind of training do you offer? What kind of training, what kind of education do you provide for a newbie? Because guys, there's nothing that can hurt your career worse than getting started on the wrong foot. You're not setting yourself up for success. Focus on mastering, on learning, on getting the education, and the money will follow. I promise you, the money will follow. But you got to get the proper training out the gate. My suggestion is that you get the proper training out the gate. Terrible training. No, I'm kidding. Tara's committing to me. So let's see. As an employee, are you guaranteed? So employees aren't listing properties. They're not showing properties. Employees are not working with buyers and sellers. Employees are assisting the agents that are out working with buyers and sellers. Good. Gotcha. Okay, good. So an employee, they're the ones answering the phone, and they're making coffee for our sales meeting, and they're making copies for your open house brochure, and maybe helping train you with your, e-program, right? The employee works for the firm. The employee, I'm a heavy, my background is as an employee. I probably spent the first 14 years of my career as an employee before I made the switch to an independent contractor. And I helped the agents. Everything I did was, how can we benefit the agent? Okay. A good question came in, and we're going to talk more about this as we go. How long can you be a provisional broker? So as a provisional broker, to drop your provisional status, you have to take post-licensing. So once you get your license, you got 90 additional hours of education. And those are broken down into 3 30-hour classes. Once you complete post-licensing, you remove your provisional status, and you're just a broker. You have 18 months to take those extra 90 hours. Once you get your license, you have 18 months. Do you pay fees when you join a firm? Of course. You like the power, you like the copier, you like that staff, they got to pay them somehow. What are the fees? Don't type that. They're all different. Every single compensation plan is different. Why do I want you talking to 2 or 3? Because you need to see those differences. Guys, remember, it's not your commission. Whose commission is it? I don't think we specifically said this out loud yet. Whose commission is it? Yeah, it's the firm's commission. The firm shares their commission with you. Because who's the agency agreement with? The relationship is not with you, it's with the firm. So what's that split? What's that compensation plan? They are all different. So we won't test again. Each post-licensing class has a test. Is that what you're asking? All 3 post-licensing class has a test, but I'm here to tell you post-licensing isn't near as intense as pre. So once we get you through pre, a lot of people will tell you getting your real estate license is the hardest part of this industry. The NC exam. Dawn, I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your question. I don't know if it's easier to unmute yourself or. Okay, so yeah, you take your NC exam, your provisional broker. How you drop that provisional status is you take 3 post licensing classes. Each post class has a test, but post licensing isn't near as intense as pre. If we get you through pre. The last thing I want to say about this, a couple years down the road, Tim, we'll talk about that when we get a licensed law and commission. We'll slow down. Don't put your cart in front of your horse, okay? All right. So, oh, I just lost it. I'm sure I'll think of a break. Before you guys go to break, though, I would like to ask, again, be reminded to keep distractions at home to a minimum. I'm starting to see a lot of you talk on the phone during class. I'm starting to see a lot of you talking to other people in the room during class. I get it, you're at home. There are things going on, but I just ask that you commit to being here and making this a priority. If you need to take a call, I get it. Just please not on camera. If you need to take a call, you can excuse yourself from class and come back when you're done. If you need to tend to families or pets or whatever, just excuse. All I've ever asked is that you guys communicate with me in the chat, but I don't want distractions to be distracting to other students. So if somebody's watching you, chat on the phone, that could be very distracting, right? So I just please ask that when we're together Tuesday, Thursday, 9 to 1, you give me your time. And please remember too, our breaks are 10 minutes. So let's work hard to get back within that 10-minute time frame so we can keep going. Fair enough? I'm starting to notice these things as we get comfortable with each other, we tend to start to get a little lax. So just as a good refresher of the rules and make sure we're all here. Have I proven myself that this stuff is hard? Have I proven myself to you guys? So, okay, I wasn't just kidding with you. So please be here with me. With that being said, let's take a 10-minute break. We come back, we're so close to finishing Unit 7. Okay. So we're back. I'm going to take attendance. All right, let's wrap up Unit 7. And we're going to wrap up Unit 7 with some, I'm going to let you guys do some thinking. I've done a lot of talking. Now it's time for you to do some thinking. So we're going to put some situations up. You guys just think about it. Tell me what you think. So let's see. The first situation. The listing agreement does not authorize dual agency. The seller has said no to dual. Consumer contacts listing company to see the property. The broker reviews the working with real estate agent disclosure and offers to show the property as a seller's agent, sub-agent, cautioning the buyer that nothing the buyer reveals is confidential and the buyer should act as if they were talking directly to the seller. If the buyer agrees, the broker provides written notice of seller sub-agency and shows the property. In this situation, did the broker do anything wrong? What do you guys think? So they did. They provided the working with real estate agent. Yeah. In this case, the broker did everything right. Why? Because the seller did not authorize dual agency. Did the agent attempt to create dual agency? Did the agent attempt to create an agency relationship with this buyer? What if they look at this home and say, nah, this isn't for me. Can you work with me on other properties? Now, can we have a conversation about buyer's agent, enter into oral buyer agency? The no to dual is just no to this property. Everybody with me? So this one doesn't work out. Hey, let me try to secure you for the next one. The agent did everything right in this scenario. They explained, nothing confidential, and they showed as a sub-agent. Questions on this one? So, listing agreement, again, does not authorize dual agency. A broker in the company is working with a buyer under an oral buyer agency agreement. The buyer now wants to see one or more of the company's listings. First off, we need to have if we haven't talked to this buyer about dual agency yet, then this is the time that we need to, right? We don't necessarily talk to buyers about dual agency when we first meet them. We don't really need to talk about it until they want to see something that my firm has listed. And we've been scooting along under an oral buyer agency agreement, but now things have changed, right? Because now the buyer wants to see a property that my firm has listed. The problem is that the listing agreement says no to dual agency. The listing agent can approach the seller and say, I know you said no to dual, but we have a buyer that's interested. They want to see your property. Would you consider changing your mind? And if the seller says, no, I am not changing my mind, can I show this property to the buyer? If the seller refuses to budge, can we show this to our buyer?
No.
Several heads go no. I hear you say no, no. If the seller refuses to budge, I'm sorry, buyer, I would love to show you this property. My seller does not allow dual agency. We cannot show it to you. If the seller changes, if the seller says, oh my God, whatever, I'm ready to sell. I don't care. Just bring me somebody in. We can now show this to our buyer. The seller changed their mind orally. And I can show this to my buyer because the buyer has orally agreed to dual. So the buyer has orally agreed to dual. The seller has said no in writing, but then changes their mind. The seller can change their mind in writing. We don't have to reduce it to writing until and if this buyer presents an offer. If this buyer presents an offer, now I got to get the seller changed in writing. If this buyer walks in the front door and says, nah, this isn't a house for me, we don't need to do anything. Everybody with me? Presenting the offers when we either have to have it in writing or have any changes in writing made. So for the buyer, I can have oral dual because I can have oral buyer agency. Questions on this one? Why would a seller not allow her to buy or see the property they're selling? Because I looked at my seller and said, if you agree to dual, my role changes from coach to referee. I'm no longer your advocate and I can't answer questions for you. As a seller, are you going, oh, that sounds great. Sign me up for that. Sellers and buyers don't like dual agency because my advocacy goes away. That's why we have to have, did y'all write this down last week several times? Informed written consent. Could I offer them designated? I can't have designated unless I first have agreement to dual. So a no to dual is an automatic no to designated. So we have to have both parties say yes to dual and then we can offer. So, yep. They say, gee, I don't like dual. Well, wait, there's more. You feel like one of those ShamWow, that ShamWow guy, remember him? But wait, there's more. If dual isn't work for you, let me tell you something about designated. That may make them agree to dual if they know they have the possibility to do designated. Does that make sense? Explain it to them. And if they say, no, 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 okay, list or seller, that's fine, but you need to understand no agent in my firm can bring their buyer client. That's what you're saying no to. Listing agreement authorizes dual and designated agency. Buyer agency agreement, it is in writing, it does not authorize dual. Buyer wants to see the company's listing. So again, we got our agency agreement in writing. Seller says yes, buyer says no. It's not a problem until the buyer wants to see that listing. Yes. Can, under these circumstances, the buyer see the listing? Can they? The buyer has said no. Seller said yes, buyer said no. And then all of a sudden buyer says, oh, I want to see your listing on 123 Main Street. We have the discussion with the buyer. Remind them about this conversation. Let them know. And because their authorization to dual is in writing, the only way I can show them this property is to get their change in writing. I'm past oral now, right? Because I've put it in writing. So once it's in writing, the only way to change it is it. So now we go through, we make the change, initial and date the change on the agency agreement. And now I can show the writing. It's got to be changed in writing. Questions? Okay, y'all get your private chat ready. Private chat's ready to me. We ready? Here's some Q&A. The commission's working with real estate agents is a mandatory disclosure. Must it be given in all brokerage transactions at first substantial contact? Look at your wording before you answer. Look at the question before you answer. William, can you change your name, please? Thank you. So the question is, must the working with real estate agent brochure or disclosure be given in all brokerage transaction? What's our absolute word? Absolute word is all, which means every single real estate transaction. Is that true? No, we only do the disclosure in sales transactions. We don't do it in lease. Thus, we don't do it in all. See what they like to try to do to you guys? Isn't that just mean? Questions on that? Every single word means something. All right, Q&A. Does the working with real estate agent disclosure apply to commercial sales transactions? Y'all just did my heart good. Does it apply to commercial sales transaction? Yes, the rule says all sales transactions. And remember, you guys, please hear me. The only time you need to worry about auction is if the question specifically says auction. If it doesn't say auction, then pretend like auction doesn't exist. So when we say all sales transactions, yes, because auction doesn't exist. If, you hear me stressing the word if, right? If you get a test question about auction sales, then no, the disclosure is not required. Otherwise, just pretend that auctions is not even a thing. Questions? Comments? Everybody ready to exhale? I feel like we've been holding our breath the last, how long have we been in Unit 7? We made it. Key terms, the beginning of Unit 7, every unit has key terms. If nothing else, know what the words mean. That's a good start, right? Knowing what the word means. The key point review is your Cliff's Notes. It's the summary of Unit 7. Use it as a review. And then the student quiz, 182 to 185. Unit 7. You're dealing with Unit 7 every single day of your real estate career. Agency is one of the most important things that we deal with. Property management, sales, whatever avenue you're going. We'll talk about property management in Unit 12. Remember me babbling on about the importance of Units 7, 8, 9, and 10? Something about that? Yeah. Okay. We good? Everybody good? Nobody? No thumbs up? At least on page 2. Let me go back to page 1. Okay, good. All right, I got thumbs up here. Okay. All right. Big deep breath. Unit 8 is agency contracts. We're still talking about agency, but now in Unit 8, we're going to form these relationships. So in Unit 8, we're going to explain our agency contracts. We're going to talk about some seller disclosures. We've kind of hinted upon these, but there's certain seller disclosures that we have to talk about. We're going to describe specifically about working with sellers and buyers. And then the very end of Unit 8, we get to figure out your commission. So we're going to do some math, but it's fun math because it's your math, right? We won't see this today, so be prepared for some math on Thursday. If math isn't your thing, look ahead. Can it hurt you to look ahead? Can it hurt you to expose yourself to it before class? I don't think so. Also, the math we're going to do is seller net. Do you think it's common for the seller to look at you and say, when you sell my house, how much money am I going to make? Do you think that's a pretty common question? Absolutely. So we're going to talk about seller math. That's the seller net. That's the other math in Unit 8, but we won't see that till Thursday. So as a refresher, we looked at this at the beginning of Unit 7, and we talked about just the terminology. And now that we're getting into the forms, we're going to see this more in Unit 8. Specifically on our forms, it lists the selling agent, the selling firm. The selling firm is the one working with the buyer. Our forms mention the listing agent and the listing firm. Those are the ones working with the seller. So we need to make sure we have a good understanding of the terminology that we're going to see in the forms that we use every day. Okay, so the selling agent and the listing agent. So to start Unit 8, let's talk about our written agency agreements. And there's some rules when it comes to our written agency agreements. Written agency agreements must. Is there any wiggle room to the word must? Must is what? An absolute word. I've had a request to go back here. Remember, we're recording, and we saw this in Unit 7. It's in Learn, Test, Pass. Okay. Okay, so why is, because they're the ones, why is selling for the buyer? Because they're the ones selling the property. They're selling the property to the buyer. They're not listing it, they're selling it. Compare selling to seller. So our written agency agreements must be signed by all parties. The seller signs the listing agreement, the buyer signs the buyer agency agreement. The agent is allowed to sign on behalf of the firm. The agency agreement is between the client and who? The firm. As an agent of the firm, we have authority to sign those listing agreements on behalf of the firm. Last week, we talked about classifications of agency relationships. We talked about universal, general, and special. Who remembers what my relationship is with my firm? Universal, general, or special?
Special.
Nope, not with my firm.
General, because you have limited power.
General, because I have power. And what's some of the power that I have? I have the power to sign an agency agreement on behalf of my firm. That's a general agent. I have some power. Okay, that's an example of that general agent. So written agency agreements must be signed by all parties. Once you get your license, you're going to get a license number. It's a 6-digit number. Go ahead and memorize that thing because you're going to use it everywhere you go. I swear the Real Estate Commission has no idea who Julie Campbell is, but they know who 264172 is. So anything you're doing with real estate, you'll use your license number. All of our written agency agreements have to have a definite termination date. They have to have an expiration date. We can't have this ongoing relationship that never ends. Remember, we talked last week about terminating agency agreements. If our agency agreement is up on January 25th, that means at 11:59 tonight, you and I are done. Could we agree to extend it? Of course we can. Do we have to? No. So we have a definite termination date. And then our written agency agreements are going to have the non-discrimination clause. It's going to say that I cannot and will not discriminate based on race, color, sex, et cetera, et cetera. All the protected classes that we'll talk about in Unit 19. So Unit 19 is our fair housing. We'll talk more about that then. So these are the musts for our written agency agreements. Our agency agreements are employment contracts. We're being hired to do a job. If you enter into a listing agreement with me, I'm being hired to list and sell your home. You're employing me. Buyer's agency agreement, you're hiring me to help you find and purchase a property. Property management, you're hiring me to manage your property. They're employment contracts. Please make sure you write that first bullet point down. That does tend to be a problem topic. Agency agreements are employment contracts. We're being hired to do a job. We said earlier that we can work at first with an oral buyer agency agreement or an oral tenant agency agreement at first. That's only for buyers and sellers. I'm sorry, buyers and tenants. When you're working with sellers and owners of a property management, those agreements have to be in writing from the beginning. I cannot perform a single service for an owner without having a written agency agreement. I cannot perform a single service for an owner without having a written agency agreement. A question came in about the agency agreement in your books. Nope, those are out of date. Agency agreements, look at Learn, Test, Pass. I always have the current Learn, Test, Pass for you. I don't know why they put forms in your book. It drives me nuts. So anytime you're looking at a form, go to Learn, Test, Pass. So let's talk first about our listing agreement. The whole reason we use listing agreements, well, one, it's an employment contract. In part of the employment contract, remember one of the duties that the principal owes me, we talked about in Unit 7, one of the duties that the principal owes me, they owe me compensation. And if I don't have a written employment contract, I don't deserve compensation. So one way I can secure my commission is to have a written agency agreement. The listing agreement spells out how much the seller is going to pay the firm. And it also spells out how much of the firm's commission are they going to share with whomever brings the buyer. Seller pays the listing firm shares their commission with whomever brings the buyer. Another big reason why we use listing agreements is to create inventory. We need a product to sell. A salesman needs a product to sell, right? Are you a salesman if you don't have a product? You got to have something to sell. So by having inventory, by having properties listed in the MLS, it opens up to all of us agents in the MLS. It gives us inventory. It gives us a product. And as we said with our listing agreements, they must be in writing from the beginning. The exception is when we can change it because the buyer has said yes or probably no to dual agency orally. So what we were just talking about, if it's in oral, you can change it in oral. So the seller can change their mind and allow dual orally as long as the buyer's already agreed orally. Make a note in your book, page 188, the next to last paragraph explains that again, that oral dual agency and when you can change and when you can't. So there's another paragraph there, page 188, next to last paragraph. So how do you get customers? How do you get sellers? How do you get buyers? Well, I'm not going to tell you how you can. What we're going to talk about are things that you can't do. There are rules in place on how we solicit consumers. And one of the first rules that we have to follow, once you affiliate with your firm and you join the National Association of Realtors, NAR, National Association of Realtors, you abide by NAR's Code of Ethics. And NAR's Code of Ethics says I cannot solicit somebody else's client. I cannot go through the MLS, find a seller that's been on the market for, I don't know, in this market, 2 months, call that seller, and I just randomly looked up and saw a name. So I can't call that seller and say, your agent, Alicia, boy, she's had it listed for 2 months and she's not doing a good job. Why don't you fire her and hire me? I can't do that. Sorry, Alicia, I just saw you first. I can't do that. I cannot solicit somebody else's clients. So if the property is marketed in MLS, if it's in MLS, so they've already hired somebody else. They're represented, and I can't try to persuade them from their agent. Flip that coin. Have you guys ever gone to an open house and been asked, are you working with an agent? Have you ever encountered an agent? And one of the first things they ask you is what? Are you working with an agent? If you're a buyer, I want to respect your relationship. I can't solicit. If you say no, I can solicit. If you say yes, I need to respect the fact that you already have an agency agreement. That's NAR's Code of Ethics. So what if your firm doesn't require you to join NAR? Tortious interference says the courts could decide that you wrongfully interfered with the other person's business relationship. So even though if you're not a member of NAR, you don't have to follow NAR's Code of Ethics, you still have to know that you can't solicit somebody else's active. And please note this word says solicit. What if the consumer calls me? What if Alicia's seller calls me? I didn't reach out to her. She called me. And Alicia's seller said, I'm not happy with my agent. Can you help me? First and foremost, I need to advise that seller to contact Alicia's broker, because it's not a relationship with Alicia, is it? It's a relationship with the firm. So I say, thank you for calling. I'm more than willing to talk to you. Before we continue, have you discussed with the broker? Guys, remember, we are the professionals in this transaction, not the seller. We are the professionals. If they say, yeah, I've talked to the broker and my agency agreement is up next week and I'm just ready to move on. Okay, now I can talk to that seller because they reached out to me, not the other way around, but I can talk to that seller about beginning our agency relationship after theirs with Alicia ends. I can't interfere with them in that next week or so, however long their relationship exists. How do you protect yourself in this scenario? You document what? What is it you document? Everything. Just remember, we are the professionals. So soliciting active clients, not cool. Other laws we have that affect how we can solicit, we have to honor the do not call registry. If cold calling is how you want to go, You cannot just grab a phone book or go to 411.com and just start calling random phone numbers. If you want to go cold calling, you need to get your hands on the do not call registry. And you need to make sure before you call them that they are not on the do not call registry. Maybe your firm will go in on a copy with that. I don't know how much it costs. Maybe your firm, ask your firm, will you help me pay for this? But bottom line, if they're on the do not call registry, I cannot call them to solicit their business. They've already said they don't want to be called. They don't want to be solicited. There's some exceptions. If it's a former client, if you're calling a former client that's on the do not call, you can call that former client for up to 18 months, up to the end of the relationship. So if our agency agreement expires today, I can call you for the next 18 months, regardless if you're on the do not call registry or not. So our agency agreement expires today, I can call you tomorrow, doesn't matter. I can call you for up to 18 months or until you tell me to stop. If you say, Julie, stop calling, I've got to honor your request. I can call a consumer or a customer up to 3 months after a soft inquiry, whether or not you're on the do not call. Maybe you come to my open house and you complete my open house registry and you give me your name and phone number. Even if you're on the do not call, I can call you for up to 3 months. If you send me a website inquiry, you hit my website and fill out the contact me section, I can call you for up to 18 months. That's a soft inquiry. I'm sorry, 3 months. I can call you for up to 3 months or until you tell me to stop. Anytime we're asked to stop calling, we have to honor that request. And we can call the for sale by owner, FSBO, for sale by owner, that's on the do not call only if I have a seriously interested buyer. I cannot call the for sale by owner to solicit their listing if they're on the do not call. And this is a seriously interested buyer. Don't try to use your BFF to get your foot in the front door. You seriously have a buyer that's interested. You call the for sale by owner and say, I'm working with a buyer. Can we come see your property this afternoon? Gee, Julie, what's the big deal? I get robocalls every day. Why aren't they have to follow these rules? I hear. Is anybody else ever ready to chuck their phone some days? I mean, how many of these things do we get? I don't know what rules they follow. I'm telling you what rules we follow. Bottom of page 189. Penalties. Last sentence. Federal level, you're looking up to $11,000 per call. State level from 500 to 5,000. Ouch. Is it worth getting the do not call list before you pick up the phone? I think so. Questions on do not call. The last thing we're going to talk about was soliciting consumers. The last thing we can't do, or we have to do, we have to follow what's known as the Can-Spam Act. And this is about mass email. So if you're going to use mass email for marketing, you have to have an unsubscribe button. Have you guys ever gotten junk email and there's an unsubscribe button? You have to give the consumer a way to opt out. If they reply and say, remove me from your email, you have to honor that request. So anytime they ask not to be solicited anymore, but the key to Can-Spam is you got to give them an out. And you have to honor their request if they ask to be out. All right, Chat to everyone. Your private chat might still be on. Chat to everyone. We've talked about things that you can't do. What are some things that you can do to solicit? What are some things you can do to solicit business? Mail, door to door, social media is huge. Mailings, you can send postcards, brochures, social media, door hangers with your name badge. Yes, billboards, I hear you. Signs. Yard signs is a great way to solicit yourself, isn't it? You're telling the world, I got a listing. I know how to work with sellers. If you want to sell. Car signs, my husband calls me a traveling billboard. If you ever get behind me in a stoplight, you will know it. I got my name, phone number, email. I think it says real estate professional. And I'm in my car. I'm acting like an agent, aren't I? Card wraps, yeah, flyers, general marketing, centers of influence. There you go, Mindy. Your center of influence is the best way you can start. I think I mentioned back in my admin days, I did a lot of new agent training. So I got you guys once you got your license. And I gave homework back then too, but one of our first homework assignments was to, and you guys may want to consider this, take a piece of paper and write 1 through 100, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then come up with 100 people that you know. Who are 100 people you know? The first 40, 50, 60 are pretty easy. After that, you're really digging. Well, I know my dentist. I know my mailman, right? That's your center of influence. Absolutely. Talking to people while you're out, pens, YouTube, lighters. I had an agent that built his career off of giving out lighters. Like, not everybody's quit smoking yet. Have a lighter. So again, what we have is things that we can't do. So think outside the box. How are you going to market and advertise yourself separately from the others? Okay, questions on soliciting consumers, soliciting customers, clients? See business cards. I know some people, when they train, they tell their agents, I love these ideas. They tell their agents, every day you leave the house, you put 5 business cards in your pocket and you don't come home until your pocket's empty. So every day you have a mission to put your card in 5 different people's hands. Okay. A foreign broker, real quick, a foreign broker is somebody that's licensed in a different state. They're licensed in a different state. We've talked about referral fees. So guys, remember, your license says you can only brokerage the deal for a property that's located in North Carolina. So if you know somebody that wants to move to Florida, my license won't allow me to help them do that because I'm a foreign broker to Florida. I can be paid a referral fee as long as my license is active in my state. And in that scenario, I can't go to Florida to conduct business. I can go to Florida vacation, but I can't go to conduct. I can't go to help with that friend buying a house. Sure, Melissa. Any way you can. So foreign broker, active license in another state. Question came in, can you be active in more than one state? Of course, absolutely. Absolutely. Contact the other state. I don't know all the 49 other states real estate law and rule. So how do you get licensed in Virginia when you're already licensed in North Carolina? I don't know. Call the Virginia Real Estate Commission. I can tell you how to be licensed here. Some of you, I know in this class, I know my night class, I have one that lives in Mount Airy. Anybody of you right on the border? Anybody, the Virginia border or the South Carolina border, any of you right on? No, I was gonna say, like my girl in Mount Airy, she very well may want to consider getting her license in Virginia too. Because if the property is in Virginia, she can't show it. So she may want to consider, you know those towns that like the state line goes down the street. So like one side of the street is North Carolina and a different side across the street is Virginia. That would literally be her line. She could show property here, but she couldn't show property across the street. So if you're on a border, absolutely something to consider. Okay. Let's talk about some antitrust laws. Antitrust laws, these are from Sherman Antitrust Act. This doesn't just apply to real estate, by the way. This is across the board, Sherman Antitrust Act. The whole point of antitrust laws is to prevent monopolies. Antitrust law says anybody within the business should have just as much right as anybody else. We're trying to prevent one firm, one entity from controlling everything. So we're trying to prohibit monopolies. And the biggest thing we see in real estate is price fixing. Some of you have tried to bait me. How much is commission? How much is the referral fee? Why have I not answered that question? Because price fixing is illegal. What price fixing says is that firms can't come together to set a price. Your commission, your referral fee is all determined by the firm. It's determined firm by firm. There is no standard. There is no across the board. There is no average. Your local board of realtors can't tell you how much commission to charge. The National Association of Realtors cannot tell you how much commission to charge. Each firm has their own policy on how much they're going to charge, how much the seller is going to share with the buyer, seller's agent share with the buyer's agent. How negotiable, if any, is the commission is up to the firm's policy. I promise you, you're going to be at a listing appointment. The seller will look at you at some point and say, how much do you charge? And you're going to answer per your firm's policy. And then in the next breath, the seller is going to say, are you willing to negotiate your commission? And how you respond to that depends on your firm's policy. Is your commission negotiable? It's up to the firm. You guys need to be very, very careful on how you speak when talking about your commission. Never look at a seller and say, all of us in the triad charge X amount. You just engaged in price fixing. When the seller says, what do you charge? Your answer is, my firm charges X amount. As independent contractors, we're affiliated with the firm. And if you affiliate with a firm, you honor their rules. Never, ever, ever compare your commission, your referral fees. Again, guys, there is no standard. There is no across the board. Each firm. If you get a minute in all your spare time, the National Association of Realtors is currently going through a lawsuit with the Department of Justice over this very thing. Department of Justice is accusing, amongst other things, NAR of price fixing. And NAR is saying, we've never, ever, ever. And to my NAR's never called me and said, this is how much commission you should charge. It all comes up to the firm. Can agents with the same firm make different commissions? Of course. So once you affiliate with your firm, they have a compensation plan. And there, a lot of them offer different plans, different tiers, different splits, which takes me back to why I want you talking to 2 or 3 firms so you can shop around. Bob, I know what that looks like. Looks like firms have the same commission. That's the price that the firm set. Everybody good with that? There is no across the board. This is how much we're going to charge. How much commission are you going to collect on behalf of your firm? Wait till you affiliate with your firm and find out. Okay. Another antitrust law is boycotting, group boycotting. Group boycotting, 2 or more businesses or individuals are conspiring together to push somebody out of the market. So you're getting together and you're saying, hey, let's not use this service anymore. Let's not tell our buyers to use this service. You're boycotting against that service. Let's say, for example, you're a buyer's agent and your buyer has a really bad experience with a home inspector. We all have bad days, right? Can we agree with that? We all have bad days. So before you get too excited, maybe it was the home inspector's bad day, give them a chance to make it right. But let's say you have a bad experience with this home inspector. What I can't do is call everybody else in my firm and say, we're not using this home inspector. I don't want you to use this home inspector. Shouldn't use this home inspector. We're not going to work together to push them out. You guys trust me. If the home inspector's bad, they'll push themselves out. They don't need your help. So group boycotting is coming together to conspire to push somebody out. Allocation of markets means we're just dividing the markets. As we've said, my license is good for any property located in the state of North Carolina. I choose where in the state I want to work. Let's say, for example, I want to take on Guilford County. That's going to be my market. If it's in Guilford County, that's my choice. What allocating markets would be, if you call me and say, okay, you just work Guilford County and I'll just work Forsyth County. You don't come into Forsyth and I won't come into Guilford. That's allocating the markets. I have just as right to come into Forsyth as you do. Gee, Julie, what's the big deal about violating Sherman antitrust laws? Our penalties now are looking up to $100,000 and up to 3 years in prison. So how much is how much commission does everybody in the triad charge? Don't know. What I know is how much my firm charges. Everybody with me? What questions do I have? I feel like I answered this. Can one agent make more than the other within the same firm? Yes, because each firm has different compensation plans. So once the firm collects its commission, how they share that with you depends on what compensation plan you sign up for. They're going to give you options. Most of them. Maybe some firms have what's a cap. Once you hit this level, you don't owe anything to the firm. They're all different, which is why I want you guys to talk to 2 or 3 before you commit. Okay. So earning this fee, earning your commission as a broker, typically in sales, we're paid a percentage of sales or a flat fee, either paid a percentage of the sales price, or maybe you get a flat fee. It's all negotiable between the firm and the listing agreement. You want to get paid, you have to be actively licensed. You have to maintain an active license. How you maintain that active license will be discussed in license law and commission rule. We'll help you understand how you keep an active license. The commission will allow you to get paid if your license is inactive, only if you brokerage the majority of the deal. So let's say your license goes inactive on July 1st and your closing is July 3rd. If the firm's policy allows it, the commission will allow you to get paid. Again, check with that firm policy before you sign it. Don't sign an independent contract agreement without reading it first. Earning a fee. So you're either employed by that firm that has the listing agreement, i.e. you're the listing agent. You sign that agency agreement on behalf of the firm, or you're the one that brought the buyer. You're the one that brought that ready, willing, and able buyer. Guys, please understand, this is the hard part about real estate. I'm glad we made it till break so we could take a few minutes to breathe after what I'm getting ready to say. When we earn our commission and when we receive our commission are two different things. I've earned my commission when I've brought a ready, willing, and able buyer to a seller. I don't get paid until it closes. So I've earned my commission when I brought the two together. We typically don't get paid until it closes. And if it never closes, probably not going to get paid. Can you go after the seller for the commission? Can you, the individual agent, decide to sue the seller for the commission? Who's the relationship with? The seller and who? The firm. So if your firm decides to go after the seller or the buyer for commission, that's up to the firm, not you. This is the hard part about real estate. They don't all close. So we've earned our commission when we brought the two together. I do not see a paycheck, a commission check, until it closes. Ouch. Questions on that? Concerns? I'm sure there's lots of concerns. It's the nature of the business. When you're going into commission sales, if you're a car salesman, you don't sell a car today, are you going to get paid commission? No. If you're a shoe salesman, you don't sell shoes today, are you going to get paid? No. Questions? Okay, let's take our last break. When we come back, we're going to talk specifically about working with sellers. You got it, Alicia. That's exactly right. right. How we doing? Am I doing good? Hanging in there with me? Good, good, good. So we're going to take attendance. So cameras on, please. And on you. So let's talk about working with sellers. When it comes to working with sellers, we got to talk about this idea of this pre-listing. When we are called for a listing appointment, we need when we get the call to meet with a seller, are you just gonna okie doke, I'll see you tomorrow at 2, and then just show up, say, hi, I'm Julie, and hope that your charisma and personality will win them over? We got to do some research before we get to the listing, right? And ideally, we want to learn as much as we possibly can about the home before we ever get there. Ideally, I know everything except what the inside looks like. I've pulled up zoning, I've pulled up DOT, I've pulled up the tax records, I've pulled up flood hazards, right? I've gone through my checklist that my firm provided, and I looked everything up. Guys, the majority of listing appointments these days are competitive. Which means what? A competitive listing appointment. Competitive listing appointment means that the seller is talking to at least 2 other agents. And if you're the one showing up going, what's your zoning? Are you in a flood zone? If you're the one asking questions when all the other agents in the competitive listing appointment know the answer, who do you think the seller is going to see as the more professional, as the one that's more organized, as the one that's more prepared? You need to treat every single listing, like it's a competitive listing appointment, even if it's not. You may or may not know. Bring your A game to every single listing appointment every time. And you do that by learning as much about the property as you possibly can. Seller says, I look forward to our listing appointment tomorrow at 2 o'clock. I go to work right now. Does that make sense to everybody? They're going to give their business to the one that was prepared, to the one that has a good spiel, to the one that they think can best represent them, instead of the one that's showing up asking questions that, quite frankly, the seller might say, shouldn't you have already seen my deed? Why is this person asking me about my deed when they can go find that on public records? Okay, is everybody good with that? If you want to win the business, you're going to do the work. You're going to learn as much about the home before you get there for your listing appointment. So we're going to gather information. Maybe I can ask the seller to gather some information while I'm talking to them. You know, maybe we can have this conversation and I can ask them, can you get this and this ready for me? For example, if it's in an HOA, if we have covenants and bylaws and regulations, you know, can you provide me what you have? Can we talk about that tomorrow? So there's certain things that we can ask the seller to gather. Another big thing we can ask the seller to gather, for example, is their outstanding mortgage information, their outstanding liens. What's your approximate balance or balances? We'll talk more about that in just a second. So the first meeting you have, you've done all your homework. You show up. If you haven't already, before you tour the house, you need to do your work with real estate agent disclosure. If you hit first substantial contact on the phone, then you need to do it then. If you hit first substantial contact on the phone when you're planning, you need to do it then. If you haven't done your working with real estate agent disclosure by the time you get to the front door, you need to do it first. You're going to get there, and the seller's going to be so excited to see you. And as soon as you, and they're proud, y'all, this is their home. To the seller, this is their home. And they're going to be proud, and they want to give you the grand tour. But before you guys go any further, the first thing you need to do is sit the seller down, go over working with real estate agent disclosure, tell them that until they decide to hire you, you don't owe them confidentiality. So in a competitive listing appointment, are you guaranteed a hire? No, maybe they'll hire you, maybe they'll hire somebody else. You also need to warn them about your duty to disclose material facts. They need to know this before they give you the grand tour of the house, before they start walking around and showing you, because they'll talk. They'll sit there and be like, oh yeah, you see that stain, you see this, you see that crack in the foundation. Before they tell you any of this, we have to have the conversation about my duty, my conversation about my obligation to disclose material facts, my conversation about, I don't owe you confidentiality until you hire me. Is everybody with me? So the reason I have these 3 asterisks next to the working with real estate agent disclosure, this says first meeting, but this is assuming we haven't already hit first substantial contact. And now that you're in the home, we need to explain to them, and we're going to tell them, like, you don't have to disclose anything, but I do. And we're going to make sure they understand that before we start going through and getting the grand tour. So when we're going through with the seller, we're going to inspect the property. We're going to prepare, get your listing data sheet. There's like checklists, various things that you want to look at. I'm telling you guys, after a while, after you see enough of these houses, they all start to look like they all kind of start to run together. So you maybe don't remember if this house had ceiling fans as compared to another home that you had that didn't. So you have a listing data sheet. You can go around and check lists and look at stuff, and oh yeah, ceiling fans, and that's nice. Ask the sellers, have you had recent renovations? Have you had recent repairs? If they say, yeah, we just had the whole house painted and we finished the basement, great. Was the basement permitted? And did you pay those mechanics that did the job? We got to ask these questions, right? Was that painter paid in full? Remember our mechanics liens. We need to ask if they're on public sewer or on site. If they say, gee, I don't know, ask to see their water bill. If they're on public sewer, they have a charge for sewer. If they're on site, they may want to get that thing pumped after a while. Share your marketing plan. What's your plan to sell their home? How are you going to market it? How are you going to advertise it? Are you going to do an open house? Not all houses are good candidates for open houses. My rule of thumb, if I have to put any more than 4 directional signs out, that does not make for a good open house, because I got people turn left, turn right, turn left, turn right, right? So not all of them are good candidates. That's just an example. And then we need to determine the square footage when we're ready to list it. And we're going to talk more about square footage later in this unit, so hang on to that for just a second. The listing agent's job, the bulk of the work of the listing agent is done before you ever see the property on Zillow. By the time we hit submit and it goes online, pretty much now all I'm doing is sitting back and waiting for buyers to come, right? Waiting on the offer to come. So for the listing agent, the bulk of the job, a big chunk of it is done. And very rarely are you measuring, are you determining square footage and taking pictures on this first meeting. Maybe you are. But for the most part, you're going on the competitive listing. They'll call you in a couple of days to tell you you got it. And then once you find out you got it, you get the listing agreement signed, and then you go back to do your measuring, to take your pictures. What if they say they want to paint? Great, call me when you're done painting. You guys with me? They're all different. Okay, so again, we'll talk about, there's rules with square footage. We'll talk about that in just a second. So the listing agent earns their commission when anybody, buyer's agent, possibly a seller sub-agent, brings a buyer. The buyer's agent earns their commission when they bring the buyer to the seller, but the buyers can be paid in a couple different ways. The buyer's agent, if the firm allows, may charge a retainer fee. And with a retainer fee, the buyer is paying X amount of the commission up front. You know, attorneys talk about my retainer fee is, it's kind of what we're doing here. They're talking about collecting some of their commission up front. Buyer's agents, buyer's agents. I hope you enjoy being in your car. I hope you like driving. You're going to put some miles on your car showing people property. And some agents choose to collect this retainer fee. If it closes, then that retainer fee will be credited back to you. If it doesn't, then I've collected for my time and my mileage and my tires and all that. Hear me. Your firm has to say if this is allowed or not. And if you are collecting a retainer fee, you cannot collect a retainer fee on an oral buyer agency agreement. So if you're collecting a retainer fee, it's because you have a written buyer agency agreement. I work with a woman. She is my hero. She will not work with a buyer until they sign a buyer's agency agreement and she gets a retainer fee. Her spiel, I've never heard her spiel. Of course, she's not going to share it with me. Her spiel is so amazing. By the time she gets done, buyers are going, where do I sign and who do I make the check out to? She's only had a few people say, I'm not signing that, in which case she says, good luck, bye-bye. That's her policy. She's the only one I've ever known to collect a retainer fee, and she does it well. The other way buyer's agents can get paid is the success fee. And the success fee is your commission when your buyers have purchased the property. Remember, you earn your commission when you connect the buyer and the seller, but you're not going to get paid until it closes. The listing agreement says the seller pays a listing firm, the listing firm shares their commission with whomever's bringing the buyer. Everybody good with that? Seller pays a listing firm shares their commission with the buyer's firm, selling firm. What if it's a for sale by owner? What if it's an unrepresented seller? Does an unrepresented seller have to pay me commission? Do they have to pay me commission? No, they don't. No, they don't. They're for sale by owner. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. If they are not, if the for sale by owner is not going to pay my commission, then I'm going to collect commission directly from the buyers. Our buyer's agency agreement says, I will always ask the seller to pay my commission first. But if they can't or won't, you're up. You get to pay me. And we'll see that when we look at our buyer's agency agreement. There's only two people to the transaction. There's only two people, two places that your money can come from. You either get paid by the seller or you get paid by the buyer. So if the seller won't do it, who's left? There's nobody else left to pay you. Okay. How we split fees. Again, we've talked about this, a co-brokerage sale. You have two firms. One firm has the seller, a different firm has the buyer. What if they Both don't pay you? Okay, so I'm gonna go back for 1 second because that's a good question. Our agency agreements are what? What kind of contracts are they? They're employment contracts. And an employment contract has to mention commission. Would you guys ever go to a job interview and not ask, when am I going to get paid? How much am I going to get paid? I sure hope not. So why would you sell somebody's house or offer to buy somebody's or help somebody buy a house without getting paid? Agency agreements are employment contracts. So if they enter into an agency agreement with you, they owe you a success fee. If they refuse to do it, your firm can sue them. Question came in, can an agent be both a seller's agent and a buyer's agent? Yes, that's called dual agency. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Matt. Y'all don't work for free. Trust me, there's enough people out there trying to not pay you, so don't work for free. All right, so co-brokerage sales, two firms. Co-brokerage is two firms. One firm represents the seller. The other firm represents the buyer. The listing firm says, if you bring me a seller, I'm sorry, if you bring me a buyer, I will pay you. A question came in, what if the person you're selling this house and they turn around and buy a different house? That's a different transaction. You're the listing agent in this transaction. You're the selling agent. That's two different things, two different properties, two different transactions. In-house sale, both buyer and seller in the same firm. It's in-house. How do you get paid on an in-house transaction? It's up to your firm's policy. You could have an opportunity to co-list where you have two listing firms and you co-list. Again, that would be firm's policy, how you would share that. Why would you do that, you ask? Let's say you are listing a home in Burlington. Triad MLS covers Burlington. Triangle MLS covers Burlington. So if it's $1 million home and that seller wants exposure both in Triad MLS and Triangle MLS, you may get to co-list it with an agent in Raleigh. I don't know about y'all, but sharing commission on $1 million sale, okay. I'll take half of that. So co-listing, you got two firms listing the property. Any questions so far? I think that's off topic. I'm happy to stay after class. Starting on page 211, spoken specifically on the seller, we're going to talk about types of listing agreements. All right, there's different types of listing agreements. The first type of listing agreement is called an open listing. And in an open listing, there are multiple listing agents. There is no exclusivity. The seller has hired multiple firms. Who's going to get paid? The one that brings the buyer. And the seller reserves the right to sell it on their own and not pay anybody. Now, before you get too upset, I will say, at least in the Triad MLS, open listings are not allowed. Again, I cannot speak for other MLSs. But in the Triad MLS, open listings are not allowed. There is no exclusivity. The seller is free to hire as many firms as they want to. If you bring me the buyer, you get paid. If you don't, oh well. And the seller reserves the right to sell the home without you. So if they go to work and tell a coworker about it, and you didn't bring the buyer, nobody gets paid. Another type of listing agreement is called an exclusive agency listing. An exclusive relationship means you're dating how many people? Just one, hopefully. So an exclusive agency listing, there's only one firm. The seller's only dating one firm. And that firm will get paid if they bring the buyer. And again, the seller reserves the right to sell it on their own and not pay the agent. So if their coworker in the break room says, oh man, you got a house for sale last night, you're like, great, bring me an offer. The agent's not going to get paid. While these are allowed in Triad MLS, I've never ever seen one. They're allowed, but they're just not practiced. Not saying a firm couldn't use it. I've personally never seen one of these. So what do we see that we deal with every day? What's the one we like the most? What we like the most is called the exclusive right to sell. One agent, that agent gets paid. I don't care where the buyer comes from. I bring the buyer, I get paid. You bring the buyer, I get paid. Seller brings the buyer. Oh yes, I get paid. Exclusive right to sell listing agreement. One broker, one firm. Firm gets paid regardless of where the commission comes from. I've taken these three, kind of giving you a little summary. The dollar signs mean you get paid. This should be in Learn Test Path. I'll check to make sure it is, but I should have pulled this out. So if you want to refer to it, make myself a note. If I forget. What we see the most is the one we deal with, the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. Questions on the types of listing agreements? Okay. In North Carolina, we have something called the North Carolina Protection Agreement. This is not an agency agreement. It does not create agency in any way. This protection agreement is a good one. It protects your commission. You want to protect your commission? For an unrepresented client, you use this protection agreement. So the for sale by owner, you're working with a buyer. The buyer calls you and says, I'm interested in a for sale by owner. Can we go see it today at 2 o'clock? And you say, great. So you call the for sale by owner and you say, hey, I have a buyer. Because remember, initial contact, I have a buyer. They want to come see the property at 2 o'clock today. And you say, they say, great, we'll see you at 2. And then you ask the for sale by owner, are you willing to pay my commission? Are you willing to pay me to bring the buyer? And the for sale by owner says, oh yeah, sure, I'm going to pay you. Are you going to trust that? Are you going to trust that this complete stranger is going to pay? But they said they would. Come on, guys. They said they would. Isn't that good enough? No. How do you protect your commission? You enter into protection agreement. So when they say, yes, we're going to pay your commission, page, where is it? Page 212. The name of the form is so long. I always got to look it up. The in practice at the bottom, unrepresented seller disclosure and fee agreement. It's not an agency agreement. Nobody's hiring me. They are just protecting my commission. So if the for sale by owner agrees to pay me, I'm going to protect that using this agreement. I'm going to send another form too for this for sale by owner. Not only am I going to do the protection agreement, what else am I going to send or take with me. What else am I going to have the for sale by owner sign off on? Yep. Doesn't that for sale by owner have the right to know that I represent the client, the buyer, I'm sorry, the buyer client, and what they share with me is just like talking directly to the buyer, and be careful what you tell me, and I don't know you confidentiality and blah, blah, blah. So if they agree to pay my commission, in addition to the protection agreement, we're still going to do our working with real estate agent. If they're not going to pay me, I still do the working with real estate agent. A question came in, protection agreement only be used for sale by owner transactions, any unrepresented. So yeah. Unrepresented, that's what we were shooting here for. An unrepresented seller. If the for sale by owner says, no, I'm not paying you, that's why I went for sale by owner. So I don't have to pay commission. That's their right, right? They're not in agreement with a firm. They don't have to pay you. They say no, then you call your buyer. Our appointment is scheduled for 2 o'clock today. By the way, they're not going to pay me. So if you move forward with this house, you will be paying my commission. If the buyer says, no, I'm not going to do it, then I'm not going to show them that house. Right? Not unless you want to work for free. If you want it for free, by all means. So I'm going to, because I had a question. So I'm going to go back again. The one that we like, the preferred, is the exclusive right to sell, because you get paid no matter what. Are we good with that? Exclusive right to sell, you get paid. So that's a preferred. All of these are called full service contracts. I'm providing a full service for my commission. We may also have a limited service listing contract, a limited service agreement. And with a limited service, I'm probably not charging commission. I'm charging a la carte pricing. I'll put your home in MLS for X amount. I'll do your open house for X amount. I'll put a lockbox on your door for X amount. There are firms out there set up as limited service firms, which you need to make sure you understand. A limited service firm still owes the seller old car. It's the services that are limited, not the duties. So limited service firm still owes a seller old car. They offer a la carte pricing. Investors tend to gravitate towards this more because they can get their listing in MLS. That's the big thing. They want exposure. They want that advertising. You get your listing in MLS. So you pay me X amount, put your listing in MLS. I was the buyer's agent in in one of these transactions once. My buyers went open housing because I was doing an open house that Sunday. So I sent them open housing. And they called me after the open house and they said, we found the one, we want to write it up. I said, well, gosh, I need to go look at this, right? Because I've made a policy, a rule for myself. I'm never writing an offer on a property that I haven't seen. So I went out after my open house, looked at the house and said, wow, this is really nice. I got to tell you guys, I was a little hesitant at first because it was a limited service. And all the communication I had was with the seller. Like to this day, I've yet to have any form of communication with the agent. I submitted the offer to the seller. I negotiated with the seller. Everything I did, because those were the instructions. That's what I was told to do. That was their arrangement. I was a little nervous at first. I was like, oh God, what does this seller know? Right. But I got to tell you, it was one of the smoother transactions that I ever did. Come to find out, the seller was an investor. He does this 20, 30 times a year. So he's got that experience. The only reason he hired the firm was to get his property in MLS. When it came down to closing, they had my commission. And I think the listing firm collected like $400, right? Just enough to get it MLS. That's all they got paid for was input. Again, the important thing to understand about a limited service, you still owe that seller old car. You're limiting your services, not your duties. Questions or comments on this? My buyer told me that the seller was even the one that was conducting the open house. Like the listing agent wasn't doing that. Did they do all firms offer this? No, either you're a limited service firm or you're a full service firm, right? So it's usually the firm goes one way or the other. So how we cooperate with other brokers, how do we share our commission with other brokers? And the one way we do that is our MLS, multiple listing services. We've danced all around the MLS, so we're finally here now. Members that join the same MLS are cooperating brokers. I'm not a cooperating broker with a member in a different MLS. I cooperate with those for me in the Triad MLS. And whenever a seller agrees to sell in the Triad MLS, when they hire a firm and they enter their listing, one thing that I see in MLS that you don't is how much commission they're offering me. So when my buyer says, I want to see a listing, I go in, I pull it up. I always look for two things right away. How much are they going to pay me and who's the listing agent? Because I want to know who I'm getting ready to deal with. So I always look for two things first. And it tells me, and I know, if I sell 123 Main Street, I'm going to make X amount because they're cooperating and they're telling me in their MLS how much they're going to share with me. How are they going to cooperate with me? Obviously, MLS is a big advantage to the seller because we expose their listing. Y'all, I'm not kidding when I say this. When I put somebody's listing in MLS, it goes to thousands of other websites. And I'm not over exaggerating. Thousands of websites. It all starts with the MLS. I put it here first, and we use something called the Internet Data Exchange. Don't need to know that, but that's just a fancy way of saying that it just feeds out to all the other websites. A question comes in, is that commission for me or the firm? That's the firm's commission. Good question. The MLS tells me how much the firm's going to get. My firm policy, my independent contractor tells me how they're going to split that with the firm, or how the firm's going to split that with me. Other questions? All right, so we are now going to take just a minute and you make the same percentage every sale. Who's that up to? Who's that up to if you make the same percentage every sale or not? It's your commission agreement with the firm. They're all different. All of them. And even if they were all the same, price fixing says I can't talk about that. Okay, all different splits. All right, exclusive right to sell listing agreement. We are going to take just a few minutes. I'm going to get off PowerPoint for a second, and we're going to go in MLS, but I just want to point out, please note page 216 to 221. 216 to 221, these are terms of the listing agreement that the real estate commission says we need to be familiar with. So 216 to 221, everybody see that? And what I have done to try to help you guys, when we go into Learn, Test, Pass, if you look under the Unit 8 material, and you pull up the exclusive right to sell listing agreement with highlights, I have gone through the listing agreement and highlighted the terms, the things that the commission says you need to know on pages 216 to 221. Personally, I think you guys should look through the whole listing agreement because there's good stuff in here. But if you just want to focus on what you need to know, I've gone through and highlighted for you guys to help you narrow in. So exclusive right to sell listing agreement is entered into between the seller of the property and the listing firm. The agreement is with the seller and the firm. Again, I'll let you guys read this. Seller represents, as of the effective date, the seller is not or will not be a party to a listing agreement with any other firm. So remember, it's exclusive. So the seller has to represent that they're currently not dating another firm, or they're getting ready to break up with their firm. Seller also represents the seller's received a copy. There's our working with real estate agent disclosure and has reviewed it with the firm. So not only did they sign the disclosure, we put another plug in here for agency agreement. The term of the agreement, all written agency agreements have to have an end date. So the agency agreement shall terminate on 11:59 p.m. on this date. What's that date? It's negotiable. It's negotiable. The firm should have an idea. Don't take a listing agreement. Well, in this market, maybe. I was going to say, don't take a listing agreement for a week, but maybe in this market, you get away with it. But in a normal market, if you take a listing agreement for a week, you've just started advertising, right? You may not get it sold for, so you want to, again, we've talked about being familiar with the market, knowing what's going on around you. This is part of it. If the average days on market is 3 months, why would you take a listing agreement for anything less than that? Does that make sense? If the average days on market is 6 months, why would you take a listing agreement for 2? So again, being familiar with the market, knowing what's going on around you. This form is in Learn, Test, Pass. So I don't need to send it to you. It's right here in the Unit 8 material under agency agreements. Property, we got a place to find a street address, city, zip, county in North Carolina. And then in addition, we have our legal description. So what we talked about in Unit 4. We're going to look up the deed book and page. We're going to get the tax PIN number. We're going to put in as much about the property as we can, so we all know that we're talking about the same property. Listing agreement addresses fixtures and exclusions. Remember, we talked about fixtures back in Unit 2, and we looked at the fixture list. Well, here it is in the agency agreement, in the listing agreement. Show this to your sellers. Have a discussion. If your seller says, well, you know what, the mailbox was a wedding gift and we're going to take it with us. Great. Go out and buy a new mailbox before I market it, before I list it. Have these discussions with the sellers up front so you can address. And guys, remember what we said. You know, ideally, they're replacing it before a buyer ever sees it, right? Because a buyer's going to want what they can't have. So as soon as you say this house comes with everything but that mailbox, well, I would have bought this house if it would come with that mailbox. You know how people are, right? So if the seller can replace it before, buyer never knows that that wedding mailbox was there. What if the seller says, no, I'm not taking it down? I now have a duty as a listing agent to make sure that mailbox is excluded when the offer comes in. Make sure that the buyer knows that when they buy this house, that mailbox will not be there. So have this conversation with sellers about fixtures before you ever list it. Make sure you're all on the same page. This is fairly new verbiage. I'm just pointing this out. Sellers are now, and in our offer to purchase and contract, sellers now have to unpair or delete any smart devices they have with the home that's going to stay. So any, like the Ring doorbell or something, anything that's going to remain, sellers are just asked to put it back to factory setting, unpair their devices. If there's anything leased or not owned, the seller doesn't own it. It's not the seller's to sell, right? So if the security system equipment, for example, is not theirs, if it's CPI's, then we need to make sure we know that to let buyers know that CPI security system isn't going to convey. And then we have a place, other items that do not convey. So again, if that mailbox isn't going to, seller won't take it down and the mailbox isn't part of the sale, we're going to put that in an agreement, in our listing agreement. I got a provision for personal property. Is there any personal property that the seller is willing to leave? Doesn't mean the buyer wants it. Anything's negotiable, right? We talked about the refrigerator, for example, washer, dryer, things like that. Listing price. I cannot sign, neither party can sign an agency agreement until we've come to a decision on the listing price. Don't leave any fields blank anyway, but never ever sign an agency agreement until you guys have come to agreement on a listing price. We're going to talk on Thursday and more in Unit 17, how we can come to that listing price. And then there's certain terms. Not all sellers like working with lenders. Some sellers may say they want cash buyers only, for example. So there are certain terms that the seller is willing, understand, seller, you're limiting your pool of buyers. We'll talk about financing in units 14 and 15. Not all homes are going to get approval under FHA or VA loans. So we may have a, choice. How are we going to accept? Is it cash, conventional, etc.? Here's our compensation. Seller agrees to pay the firm a total fee of percentage of the sales price or a flat fee. It goes on to talk about when the fee is earned. Remember, earning your commission and receiving commission are two different things. So we have an agreement about when we've earned our commission. And then we have something called a protection period, not to be confused with the protection agreement. The protection period, please turn with me to page 218 real quick. The protection period is also known as the extender clause, can also be known as the override clause. This is the epitome. Three things mean the same thing. On your flashcards, write protection period, extender clause, and override clause. Everybody see that? So what this protection period does, this says, if I don't sell your home and the listing agreement expires, everybody with me? I list, market, our listing agreement expires on January 25th. If within X amount of days, completely negotiable, if within X amount of days after the expiration date, the seller sells the property, I could still be owed commission. Because if we expire today and a buyer shows up with an offer tomorrow, doesn't it stand to reason that the buyer learned about that property through my marketing, my advertising? It's protecting my commission. There's two caveats to this. It's not that easy. There are two caveats. I have to provide the seller with names, specific names of buyers. It just can't be any buyer. I have to know that Mr. and Mrs. Jones are thinking about bringing an offer tomorrow. You guys with me? I have to know that Mr. Smith, and I have to provide the seller with the names of those potential buyers. And if the seller enters into a listing agreement with another firm, I'm out. Once the seller enters into a listing agreement with another firm, now the seller owes commission to that new firm. Protection period, also known as override clause, also known as extender clause. Questions on that?
I have a question, Julie.
Yeah.
What's the incentive for the seller to sign the extender clause?
It's not.
Okay,
It's for
just to
me.
be nice.
It's for me. So if I put in, again, this is why this is negotiable. Is it 1 day or is it 60 days, right? The seller would have a hard case for 60 days. You with me? But if it's like 3 or 4, whatever you can agree to, that's exactly why the number of days is negotiable. I can't put, if you ever sell, I get a commission, right? So that's why we have a limited number of days, and the seller has to know specifically what buyers. It's not just any buyer that shows up. It's, here's the list.
So we're basically just asking them, hey, do me right.
Yeah, you're protecting, you have a period that protects your commission. Again, I expire today. Mr. and Mrs. Jones shows up tomorrow. Mr. and Mrs. Jones showed up tomorrow because of let's face it, let's be honest. They learned about the property through me. Mr. and Mrs. Jones have no way of knowing this expires today. Expiration date is not public notice.
Thank you.
Is that good? This is good, isn't it? We got forms to protect my commission. I got a protection period. I want to go back up real quick in your book on page 218. I skipped this. You guys see under brokerage fee, it talks about net listing. Net listings just say the seller needs X amount. Let's say the seller needs $80,000. Anything over $80,000 that I sell your house for, I'm going to keep the difference. So as long as I get the seller $80,000, they're happy. So if I sell your house for $120,000, how much commission am I getting? Yeah, I'm getting $40,000. Net listings are not illegal, but they are highly frowned upon. Because the debate could come in, whose best interest do you have? And if you're truly practicing old car, if you can get your seller 120, then get your seller 120. You guys with me? And if you sell for 120, aren't you going to get more commission if it's percentage of the sales price? So the higher the sales price, the more your commission. So net listings, not illegal, but very highly frowned upon.
Is there such a thing as like a tiered percentage? Like I'll
Sure.
get, okay.
Yep. If it's up to whose policy?
The listing agent.
The firm.
Yeah, the firm.
Yep. I'm not sure about that, Tim. That's kind of a new genre. You're talking about like wholesaling. I'm not as familiar with wholesaling. As far as I know about wholesaling, think about Costco. Costco buys in bulk and then turns around and sells in bulk, right? So good news is you're not tested on wholesaling. I'm on page 218. Okay. So protection period, fee due and payable. Again, this outlines there's commission earned, and then there is when do you get paid? And when do you get paid? Distribution of the proceeds from the sale of the property. So the listing agreement addresses when do you earn your commission versus when do you get paid. And then we have cooperation with other firms. So the seller pays the listing firm shares their commission with whomever's bringing the buyer. How do they share their commission? Well, we can cooperate with sub-agents representing the seller, or we can cooperate with buyer's agents representing the buyer. Remember, the firm's policy and the agreement between the firm and the seller has to address if and when sub-agents get paid. Not all firms, not all sellers are willing to work with a seller sub-agent. So we actually spell it out in the listing agreement. You bring me a buyer customer, this is how much I pay you. You bring me a buyer client, this is how much I'll pay you. Not all splits are 50-50. It's all an agreement between the listing firm and their policy and the seller. Firm's duties, I'll let you guys look at this. Remember, our agency agreements are two-way streets, which means both parties have duties and obligations to the other. So how do we know what my duty and obligation is to you? We spell it out in our listing agreement. We spell it out in our employment contract. The firm's duty to the seller is to find their best efforts to find this ready, willing, and able buyer. Disclosure material terms of the offer. We have to disclose what offers to the sellers. I can see your mouths. Yeah, we disclose all of them. So I owe that. I have a duty to my seller to disclose those terms. I have to disclose material facts. I'm not trying to hide this from the seller. I talked to him about it at our first listing appointment, didn't I? And now here we are signing the listing agreement, and it's here as well that I have a duty to disclose material facts. And then I have a duty to the seller to enter their listing in MLS. That's what the listing service is, multiple listing services. So I'm going to get their listing in MLS again. You guys, I'm so not kidding when I say this. I put your listing in MLS and it goes to thousands of websites. Do sellers like to hear that? Oh my goodness, you bet. Think about all the exposure. Think about all the people. But in addition to internet advertising, what else am I going to do? How else am I going to get word out about your listing? All written agency agreements have to have the non-discrimination clause. Here's our non-discrimination clause in bold, all upper caps. The agent of the firm shall conduct all brokerage activities in regard to this agreement without respect to the race, color, religion, sex, national origin, handicap, or familial status of any party or prospective party. Further, realtors have an ethical duty to conduct such activities without respect to sexual orientation or gender identity of any party or prospective party. This is the paragraph. This is Unit 19. So we will address fair housing, the protected classes, when we get to Unit 19. You may want to read this warning. We'll talk more about this when we get to buyers. But there's love letters out there. I call them now love letters. So we'll talk about love letters when we talk more about the buyers. The listing agreement tells the seller how I'm going to market their property. How am I going to advertise their property? What's the marketing date? When are we going to list it? When are we going to make it available for the world to see? And part of my duties, the seller has to agree. The seller has to agree to allow me to put a for sale sign in the yard. They have to agree to allow me to use key boxes, advertise on the internet, advertise somewhere other than the internet. Anything applicable, you're going to check. Here's our lock boxes. Seller does or doesn't authorize the firm to place a lock box or key box on the property. Do the firms provide the signs you put in the yard? Some will provide them. Some you have to pay for. Why? All firms are different. Compensation plan, different structures. Seller acknowledgement. Seller understands, guys, I have zero control over Zillow. Zero control over Zillow. Sometimes Zillow doesn't interpret my information from MLS accurately. What can I do about that? Absolutely nothing. Things that the seller needs to acknowledge. I have no control over visitors, over buyers. You know, tell your sellers, best way to protect yourself, put up all valuables. Don't leave temptation sitting out. I'd like to tell you everybody's ethical and responsible. I can't promise you that. So what can I do? I can make sure when you have buyers agents and buyers in your home that you are putting up your valuables. When you go on this listing appointment, my team leader does this best, and we'll end here today. My team leader does this best. She goes to a listing appointment and she tells the sellers to run out and buy a couple of those big storage totes. She says, go get 5 or 10 of those big storage totes and go through your home and put stuff up, pack stuff up, personal stuff. The buyer has a hard time imagining their family living here when they're looking at pictures of your kids. So pack up, y'all got to pack anyway, right? You got a sign out saying that you're moving, that you're selling your house. You got to pack anyway. Start with the personal. So she says, go get 5, 10 totes, depending on the size and the stuff, and go through your home and pack up stuff. And when you're done, do it again. Guys, I'm trying to sell space, not stuff. So the more space, have you ever taken a piece of furniture out of a room and noticed how much bigger that room looks? I know they have to live there. I get that. But I need to make it for our buyers to see themselves living there as well. Does that make sense? So in this conversation of packing up personal stuff, we can pack up valuable stuff too. Reduce temptation. That's right. Yeah, somebody just said, maybe sellers don't want a sign in the yard. So if they don't want a sign in the yard, then they don't have to authorize. Maybe they don't want the neighbors to know that they're selling. So they don't want a sign in the yard. That's why the seller has to authorize the firm to put a sign in the yard. Does that make sense? They have to give their permission to allow the firm to put a sign in their yard. Okay. All right. We are going to end here today. Hang on before you go anywhere. Remember, that's in Learn, Test, Pass. So when we come back on Thursday, we're going to finish talking about our listing agreement. We're going to talk a little bit more about working with buyers. And then we're going to look at the buyer's agency agreement as well. We're going to talk about seller disclosures. We still got quite a bit more in Unit 8. So we'll pick up here where we left off on Thursday. I'll stick around for any questions. I know a few of you have questions, so I'll hang around for a few minutes if you have questions. Otherwise, you guys have a good evening. Have a good day tomorrow, and I'll see everybody at 9 o'clock Thursday morning.